Please rise for the worshipful. Please rise for Her Worshipful the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council. My name is Councillor Caroline Smith. I'm the Mayor of Wokingham and will chair this meeting. Before we begin this evening, I would like to all stand and observe a minute's silence to mark the passing of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will be asking members to join with me this evening to offer our tributes to Her late Majesty. Before we do that, I would like to go through a few preliminaries. Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. Just a reminder that members do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. Please note that to avoid the chat function on Microsoft Teams being used inappropriately has been disabled for this meeting. May I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timings set out in the Constitution. Thank you. Are there any apologies for tonight?
Two apologies, Councillor Rebecca Moggetts and Councillor Jackie Rance.
And do we have any remotely on Teams?
We have Pauline Hellier-Simons and Jim Pruin.
May I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of July 2022 as a correct record, subject to the inclusion of recording Keith Baker's apologies. Please may I have a show of hands? Thank you. Councillor Fishwick?
Yeah, sorry, Madam Mayor. Page 25, item 39. It states there, local policing commander, brackets, on the 24th of June, end brackets. It should read police and crime commissioner, end brackets, on the 24th of June, end bracket. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all right. Okay, thank you. Can I have a show of hands that we all agree the minutes subject to the two amendments? Thank you. Does anyone have to declare any interest in any item on the agenda? Thank you. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am the chairman of WBC Holdings and the chairman of Loddon Homes Limited.
Thank you. Councillor Conway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm director of Loddon Homes and WBC Holdings, and just for the sake of completeness, I should say I'm a trustee of Polehampton Charity.
Thank you. Councillor David Hare.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm a director of Optalis.
Thank you. Councillor Prue Bray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm a director of WBC Holdings and chair of Berrybrook Homes.
Thank you. Is that everybody with a declaration of interest? Thank you. And now moving on to Mayor's announcements. Given the sad passing of our monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, I would like us to take this opportunity to pay tribute to Her Majesty. I would like to start with a tribute of my own before turning to members of the council in turn to offer their tributes. In order to facilitate this, I would like to propose an extension of time be permitted for this item. Do I have the agreement of the members this item be extended to 40 minutes in duration? Do I have a show of hands, please? Thank you, Carrie. I'm going to stand for mine. Good evening. It's exactly a fortnight since we heard the sad news of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. In this period, so many words have been said by literally millions of people in condolences, thanks, memories, and tributes that whatever I say will probably have been said already. It is my great honour to begin tonight by leading the Council's own tributes to Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth. This great lady has been part of this nation's shared consciousness for so many years. And for nearly all of us here tonight, we have only ever known this one great monarch. I am sure we have all shared our grief with the nation during the recent time of mourning. I think it was King Charles who said of his mother, "A life well lived." This is a fitting tribute to one woman who had lived her life to the full, keeping her promise to the nation far beyond what was expected in one so young before taking on the role of our Queen. We must also bear in mind not only have we lost our Queen, but our children have lost a beloved mother, their families have lost their wonderful grandmother and a great-grandmother. It is terrible to lose one so loved. The one memory that really helps me remember our wonderful Queen was a picture of her walking past Prince Philip, who was dressed in the uniform of the Grenadine Guards, when a swarm of bees disrupted the smooth running of the ceremony at Windsor. The photographer captured the Queen perfectly in a fit of giggles. We will never forget how central our Queen was to all our lives across Wokingham, the nation, the Commonwealth and the world. We must remember and celebrate her life of service and devotion as we struggle with her loss. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. Can I ask Councillor Clive Jones, please, his tribute?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II will have touched many people throughout the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and indeed the whole world. Queen Elizabeth II was a towering global personality and an outstanding leader. She dedicated her life to making the nation, the Commonwealth, and the entire world a better place. As a 21-year-old, she dedicated her life to one of service to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, a promise that she wonderfully kept. This is an example to so many people and a huge example to anyone in or aspiring to public service. She reminded us of important underrated qualities: duty, dedication, stability, an aim for unity, dignity, calm, unfaltering, and a lengthy 70 years of a lifetime of service. Everyone will have special memories of her reign. Many will remember her parachuting in to open the Olympic Games in 2012 with James Bond, and the celebrations of her 70 years on the throne with her cup of tea with Paddington Bear. Even at 96, she was a thoroughly modern sovereign. I was privileged to meet her during the Silver Jubilee celebrations in 1977. She did a walkabout after the service of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. I and some of my friends had stood outside St. Paul's all night. We had a very good place to watch as the dignitaries arrived to attend the service. When it finished, she appeared at the cathedral door. She turned right and began to walk down the steps. I knew at that moment that she was walking straight towards me. Seconds later, she was standing in front of me. "Where have you come from?" she asked. "How long have you been here? Have you had a good time?" I was the first person that she spoke to following service, and I have several books on the royal family that record that, which are certainly treasured memories for me. She once famously said, "Life is full of first meetings and final goodbyes." She was so right. Everyone who met her will remember their meeting with her. I certainly did, and will most certainly remember our final goodbye to her on Monday. Many residents of Wokingham will also have treasured memories of meeting Her Majesty, which they will be recalling at this sad time. Many of them will also have attended the lying in state in Westminster Hall and queued for many hours to pay their respects to her. Others will have lined the route for the funeral at Westminster Abbey. I know of neighbours who went to Windsor to stand along the long walk as the Queen came home to her final resting place within the castle. There was a graceful dignity about all the proceedings, which will have touched many who attended these events and watched them on television. Whilst we mourn the Queen, we should remember that her family have lost a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. And the grief on the faces of the royal family was very clear for all of us to see. I thought King Charles's card which said, in loving and devoted memory, very heartfelt. King Charles said thank you to his late mother in his televised address to the nation last week. He wasn't just speaking for himself and his family, but also for the nation, the Commonwealth, and indeed the whole world, when he thanked her for a lifetime of service. We should also be saying thank you to King Charles, who has started his reign building on the tradition of modernisation of the monarchy, which was started by his mother. Many of us will have been impressed that he has been able to go amongst crowds, particularly in London, and share his grief with people who have been to Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and elsewhere to express their condolences. Queen Elizabeth II made history. She was history, and Madam Mayor, she will never be forgotten.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm honoured to be able to pay tribute to Her Majesty the Queen following her funeral this week. Her Majesty had a special place in our hearts, and this was clearly demonstrated once more in the days following her death, with people of all generations, nationalities, creeds and colours queuing across Edinburgh and then again across London for many hours to pay their respects. We owe her a tremendous debt of gratitude. She was always there for us during her 70-year reign. In good times and bad, she was truly dedicated to the people and to the Commonwealth, working right up to her last days with dogged commitment. We will never forget her kindness, her dedication to her duty, and her lovely smile. May she rest in peace.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel Burgess on behalf of the Labour Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The late Queen Elizabeth's life of duty, service and dedication to our country has been an example to us all. Many of us have felt a major shift in our lives these past weeks, as Queen Elizabeth has been an ever constant, calm and wise presence in our lives for an astonishing 70 years. Even avowed Republicans have shed tears at the news of the passing of this remarkable woman. These recent weeks have manifestly shown the extent to which she was loved and respected in Wokingham, the United Kingdom and the world over. She approached her many years of service always with dignity and compassion. Our hearts go out to the royal family and our thoughts are with them as they continue their period of mourning, along with the many, many people whose lives she touched. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jim Plewing, who's remote on Teams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and apologies for not being able to be there tonight, but COVID has finally managed to catch me. Our Queen, we have much to thank you for being such a shining exemplar of dedication to duty and to public service. for showing that historic organisations and long-standing plans can successfully evolve and adapt to meet changing times, for showing that successful leadership can be achieved with dignity, humility, compassion, and with humour, for showing that family can always be a priority no matter what. For all of these things, we thank you. But most of all, we simply thank you for being you and for being our Queen. God bless and may you rest in peace.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whenever anyone we know dies, we feel a sense of loss. Sympathy for the family of the deceased mixes with memories of the loss of our own loved ones and a heightened sense of our own mortality. But in this case, the enormous outpouring of grief indicates the high regard in which the Queen was held, not just in this country, but across the world. Many of us have been struck by the incredible sight of queues of people stretching for miles to see the Queen lying in state. The dedication of those people, waiting patiently for hours and hours to pay their respects, fills us with admiration and a sense that someone very important to so many lives has left the stage. Over the last few days, I've been asking myself why the Queen's death has evoked such an impressive response. To mention her striking beauty as a princess and then Queen, her captivating smile, her sense of humour, her warmth of personality, and her ease of manner is, I would suggest, to focus only on the most superficial causes of her popularity. In part, of course, the explanation is the length of her reign. Very few of us were born when her father was on the throne. All our lives, she has been a reassuring constant in a rapidly changing world. She has been the mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother of the nation. But to get to the essence of her appeal to so many people, including many who are agnostic on monarchy or even Republican in sentiment, we have to recognise the quality that the Archbishop of Canterbury emphasised on Monday, her selfless sense of duty and her commitment to public service. If we can try in our own sphere to follow the lead she has given, that will be our lasting tribute.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Beth Rowland, please.
Thank you. Many years ago, I remember seeing "The King is Dead" on the boards outside newsagents' paper shops. I'd learned to sing "God Save the King" at school, although I didn't understand who the king was. I think I was about 7. The following year, 1953, my nana bought a 9-inch black and white TV, and all the street came to celebrate in her house the coronation of this beautiful lady who was to be our new queen. It was a fairy tale day, even on a tiny TV. I had a gold model of that beautiful gold coach and a round jigsaw puzzle of the whole procession. I went through my school life learning lots about kings and a few queens, hence my love of history today. When I married and moved to Windsor, I became even more interested as we lived in a flat across the road from the stunning castle. We visited regularly and saw the actions of the royal family on a regular basis. We saw them driving cars, the flag flying when they were in residence at the castle, and of course the many shops selling memorabilia. I took a real interest in royal history. You could go into the castle those days for free. And then I became interested in politics and was first elected in 1991 and to this authority in 1996, and could enjoy the beautiful pictures that we have. In 2013, I was honoured to be invited to a royal garden party. By then, I was a wheelchair user. I was given a parking space right across the road from Buckingham Palace and only had to get across the road in my wheelchair. where I was provided with a young serviceman in full uniform to get me into the royal lawns, which were over a gravel pathway. A nightmare in a wheelchair. Only someone who appreciated fine detail and thought of others would appreciate this. Our Queen had. We really enjoyed the garden party and being able to go around the beautiful gardens, enjoy the sandwiches and tea in a cup and saucer. See the great and the good. It was the year after the Olympics and there were lots of stars there. Towards the end of the event, all disabled guests were taken to one side and lined up against the side of the palace, not worrying at all. The royal party, princes, princesses, dukes and duchesses, so many of the royal family were there. The Queen made a beeline for people in wheelchairs and spoke to each and every one of them. We were also allowed to take photographs. I've got a photograph of the Queen talking to me. Others in the party did the same. A real day to remember. I saw the gracious in practice. May our gracious Queen rest in peace. Thank you, Mum, for all those years of faithful service, and now, God save the King.
Thank you. Councillor Prue-Bray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I met the Queen when I accompanied my parents to a Buckingham Palace garden party as an unmarried daughter. So many years ago that I can't actually work out what year it was. I think around 1980. I remember wishing I had worn a hat and that she seemed so much smaller than I had imagined. But I also remember that despite all the people she had already spoken to that afternoon, she managed to sound interested when she spoke to us. And I remember that wonderful smile that lit up her face, as has been mentioned so many times in recent days. That encounter with the Queen lasted perhaps 30 seconds. I'm one of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions who met her over the course of the 70 years she reigned. Like them, I have never forgotten meeting her. And if the media coverage is anything to go by, like them, oh dear, I've written these words and I mean them now. I found myself strangely and rather unexpectedly moved by the events of the last 2 weeks since her death was announced, including as I'm speaking now. It all feels a bit surreal. It's hard to imagine this country without her. She promised to serve us all her days, and she fulfilled her promise. And this is my chance to publicly say, oh dear, thank you. Thank you, Mum.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Gray, please.
Right. As a child, I spent 5 years living in Fiji. One of our house servants insisted on taking me on a trip to her village on her home island. This involved a 2-day boat trip across the Pacific, followed by half a day of walking overland to the village. Now, this was an island which had no newfangled technologies such as roads, electricity, or a public water supply. The people in this village had heard of things like telephones, TVs, and cars, but very few had actually seen one, never mind used one. Their lives revolved around fishing, hunting, and farming. But there on the wall of every hut was always a picture of the Queen. Fiji became a republic in 1987, but the Queen was still held in such high regard that they maintained the Queen as their tui viti, effectively the Queen of Fiji, even though she had no constitutional or legal standing. I do not yet know if the status will remain the same with King Charles III. I think the point of what I am saying is that our Queen was not just the Queen of the United Kingdom. She was the Queen for many, many people around the world who honoured and venerated her and were inspired by her existence. I sometimes feel that the residents of Britain often forget the wider meaning of the monarchy. It was in Fiji where I first met the Queen for the first time, away from the big crowds and the mayhem you get in the big industrialised countries. She treated everyone who came to see her with respect, no matter their wealth or status. And I think that we should now remember her and think of this as her legacy. Mothe Banaka Vakalevu is what I will say, meaning goodbye and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was extremely proud and privileged to meet the Queen when she rewarded me my MBE. We were all trained as to precisely what we had to do, typical British control, and what we should call Her Majesty. You called her on the first conversation Her Majesty, and afterwards Mum. So remember that, everyone, if any of you gets to meet her, or the King, should I say. Well, it got to my time to approach her, and my nerves simply took over. I got to her, did my bowing, approached her, she shook my hand, and I immediately forgot totally the protocol on speaking to her. But that had no effect on her. My wife, who joined me during that on that day, said that I was talking to her for the longest of any recipient of awards. But to this day, I cannot remember our conversation except one bit. She asked me where I came from, and my response was, just down the road from where you live, just outside Reading. She came across with a warmth that I had not experienced before or since. From a wider perspective, she was the foundation or rock that this great country of ours had been built on. Internationally, she was revered not just in the Commonwealth, but right across the world. I agree with Boris Johnson when he, in his tribute, called her Queen Elizabeth the Great. I really think she was the greatest woman that we have ever experienced. She will be sorely missed. She may have gone, but she will live on in our hearts forever, and her legacy will be everlasting.
Thank you. Councillor Shahid Yunus, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Exactly a fortnight ago, on Thursday, the 8th of September, we heard the sad news of passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. This sadness was shared by millions of people around the world, as she was admired not only in the United Kingdom, but around the Commonwealth and much beyond. Members of the Muslim community also chanted the Arabic words, which is Inna lillahi wa inna alayhi raji'un, which means surely we belong to God and to him we shall return. This is mostly used when hearing news that one person dies. Her demise is also a reminder for us all that there is nothing eternal. We are on borrowed time. Death is only a certain thing in life. Her 70 years of reign was indeed an embodiment of grace, elegance, and dignity. She saw leadership as an act of worship and utter devotion to her duty to serve. It's a leadership type that is selfless and focuses on others. As public figures, there are many leadership lessons we can take from her life, and I shall just mention 3 of them. Number 1, resilience and adaptability. During her remarkable time as a monarch, Queen lived through war and peace, recessions and times of growth, family scandals and tragedies, and a global pandemic. In total, she's appointed 15 different prime ministers, met 14 US presidents. She saw a mind-blowing social, economic, and technological changes and challenges in her lifetime, and has demonstrated an extraordinary level of resilience and adaptability. Number 2, creating a solid circle. Being the Queen and being in a leadership role share a common trait. One of them is that although it looks like it's a one-person job, in reality, it requires a team effort. The Queen had a solid circle of advisors that she collaborated with before making a decision. She delegated tasks and shared responsibilities with other members of the royal family. A great leader understands the importance of having an excellent team to collaborate with, and most importantly, making the most of their different areas of expertise, experiences, and point of view. Number 3, work hard, but find time to do what you love. Queen's schedule was always manic. However, it is no secret that she always managed to balance her responsibilities with hobbies, like football. Like me, she was Arsenal supporter. Spending time with her coaches, visiting her horses, and eating sandwiches with raspberry jam, another one of my favorite. Balancing work and play and to do the things that make you truly happy is an incredibly important lesson for the busy leaders. Lastly, our thoughts are with the royal family at this difficult time. Queen Elizabeth II will be greatly missed by all. May she rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, members, for joining with me to commemorate the Queen for all those moving and beautiful tributes that have just been given. Thank you. We're now moving on to public questions. I have a few members of the public here, and I'd like to remind the executive members that responses should be no longer than 2 minutes. Okay, first questioner, please, Tony Johnson. You have a question for Councillor Clive Jones. Would you like to ask your question?
I too pay my respects to the Queen and would like to ask the question standing in my name.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you for bringing this typographical error to our attention. As you rightly state in the extract included in your question, Rule 4.2.2.1 should actually state Rule 4.2.2.2. In both instances, and yes, the error has appeared in the Constitution since 2015. We are intending to address this typographical error at our next council meeting in October. Thank you very much for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Johnson? Thank you.
Thank you, Clive, for providing a response and acknowledging the fault in the Constitution. It would appear that, except for this meeting and the last one, this council has been acting beyond the powers granted it in its own constitution in changing the order of past meetings. Although addressed to the leader, this supplementary is as much for all of you as members. Would this council prefer to behave and conduct itself in accordance with the existing constitution? Or should you citizen councillors find a tennis court somewhere and work out a more equitable constitution which is not subject to the diktat of whichever autocrat or bureaucrat believes they are in charge? Vox pop, vox dei, as one member remarked recently, although in English. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm sure I speak for everybody in the chamber when I say that we would prefer to conduct ourselves in accordance with the Constitution. But for the standard part of your supplementary, I'll come back to you with a written answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alan Davis, a good question for Mr. Councillor Paul Fishwick, please.
Thank you. In implementing its current policies and processes for road maintenance, which result in priority given to roads with high traffic density, how does the council actively manage the risk of injury to pedestrians and other road users, including consequent compensation claims in poorly maintained roads with low traffic density, like South Close?
Thank you, Alan, for your question. The selection of roads to be included in the annual planned structural maintenance programme is based upon the UK Pavement Management System, UK PMS, which includes annual network condition surveys and our own internal design process, including site visits to check the condition survey scores and, where required, core sampling to establish the scale of intervention to be recommended. This is recognised by central government and the wider industry through its code of practice as the national standard for well-managed highway infrastructure. Wokingham Borough Council structural maintenance programme is based on the condition score of each road. Schemes with the highest condition score are being prioritised first. This approach ensures that the annual structural maintenance programme is based on meeting the highest priority needs on the WBC network within the funding available. In addition to the annual UK PMS described earlier, the network is also subject to safety inspections as defined by the Wokingham Highway Inspection Policy. These inspections are carried out by trained and competent inspectors at defined frequencies to ensure it is safe for public use. In between inspections, defects can be reported to the Borough Council, and these will be inspected and repaired if they meet the required criteria. Thank you.
Mr Davis, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
I understand that roads like South Close are subject to this annual inspection to assess their condition, and it is those assessments which inform the council's decisions on road maintenance priorities. They're therefore very important. Would Councillor Fishwick please be prepared to share the current inspection report for South Close with me, and then come and assess for himself with me how closely that inspection report matches the reality?
I will be happy to meet you on site. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr Andy Bailey to ask a question of Councillor Lindsay Ferris, please.
Can the Executive Mayor for Planning please update me on the next phase of the local plan updates, including approximate dates?
Thank you, Mr Bailey, for your question. A new cross-party member working group has been established to consider options on how we might best plan for development going forward. The working group has recently been briefed on the main issues raised by respondents to previous consultations and continues to be briefed on any new technical evidence as it emerges. The new group is currently in the process of familiarising themselves with larger scale promotions across the borough. This will involve visiting each area and receiving a presentation from promoters as to their vision. Work will then continue to review the options. The programme for submitting a new local plan will be highly influenced by whether a further consultation is required before proceeding to confirm the strategy we wish to submit for examination. A further consultation is most likely should the decision be to vary significantly from the strategy previously consulted on. I do not, however, expect to be in a position to confirm the detailed programme until early next year.
Thank you. Mr Bailey, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
And my supplementary question, does this administration support building houses beyond the planned period?
This is a very controversial question. I think there's a very important announcement from one of the interim Secretary of State for Levelling Up. And he raised the issue about flood resilience. And in particular, flood resilience needed to be taken account of during the whole duration of a planning development. And I find it very difficult to be able to consider the planning and flooding arrangements for a site close to a river, or any river for that matter, which takes us 20 years into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Thank you. Now we're moving on to petitions. I understand we have a petition from Miss Heather Murray regarding road safety on William Heelis Way. Miss Murray, you have 3 minutes to summarise your petition, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good evening. My name is Heather Murray. I've been a resident in the Montague Park development since 2016, and I'm also a parent with 2 children attending Montague Park Primary School. I'm here tonight with Patrick Pritchett, who is the head teacher and is fully supportive of our petition and is hugely passionate about resolving the issues I am going to outline this evening. I'm here to present a petition which has 538 signatures from a combination of both parents and residents on the development. The petition is calling for Wokingham Borough Council to put in place some essential interventions that keep our children safe as they go to and from the school. To outline what these are. Firstly, we are asking for a 20-mile-per-hour zone on William Heelis Way outside our school. Now that the railway bridge is open, cars are frequently speeding across the bridge and past the school. Specifically, when you approach William Heelis Way from the south, go over a hump bridge to go over the railway, followed by a sharp left turn immediately beside the school. There are no speed limit signs and no barriers to protect pedestrians on the pavement. There are no signs warning of the zebra crossing after the left turn either. For the safety of our children, the signatories in the petition are calling for the speed limit past the school to be set at 20 miles per hour. Other schools have these limits, so the precedent has been set from our perspective, and our school should not be an exception. There should be 20-mile-per-hour markings on the roads and flashing road signs by the road to indicate the limit. Secondly, we are also asking for railings on the pavement outside the school to act as a line of defence between the children and the traffic. Thirdly, we are asking for a crossing to be reinstated. Further up William Heelis Way, one of the crossings has been removed, although the pavement remains dropped on either side and in the road island. There has previously been a painted crossing in place, but the white lines were removed when the road surface was relaid. This crossing is indicated on the safe route to the school, but it's no longer official, although it's used by parents and children daily. The danger of this is that there are dips in the curb and there is a section in the middle of the road for people to wait. But without the white lines, it is leading to increased ambiguity and therefore danger, as some cars stop when they see pedestrians, but others don't. With the school now full and with an increased number of children from year 4 upwards being allowed and encouraged by our heads to walk to school by themselves to create independence, the lack of an official crossing is putting them at risk. One of our previous ward councillors, Julian McGee-Sumner, had agreed with David Wilson Holmes to pay for half of the work to reinstate the crossing. The signatories of this petition are calling on Wokingham Borough Council to complete this work. Ultimately, our key concern is the speed of traffic on the road outside our primary school. Flory at Montague Park only has a small car park, and this means many children of primary school age have to cross the busy road on their way to and from school. We're asking the council to take preventative steps to reduce the chance of an accident.
Sorry, you near the finish?
Yeah.
I'll let you go for another couple of seconds.
Okay, I appreciate that there is an argument that we have not yet seen an accident on this road, but as the daughter of a traffic policeman, I am very well aware that action is usually only taken after there has been an incident or statistic, but no one in this room would want that for their child. We believe it's in the best interest of all children that they can walk and cycle to school in safety. Now that the road has been adopted by the council, we ask for action to take place before there is an accident rather than as a result of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Can you please hand your petition to Prayer, who will pass it on to the appropriate officer, please? And thank you. Okay, I understand we now have a petition from Mr. Alan Davis regarding road and pavement repair, resurfacing and maintenance on South Close. Mr. Davis, you have 3 minutes to summarise your petition, please.
Madam Mayor, members and officers, this petition, signed by all residents of South Close, documents the extremely poor condition of their road and pavements, highlights the safety risks and calls for remedial action. South Close is a cul-de-sac of just 11 properties near the town centre, located at the end of a private road. It was constructed around 1961, and we believe that it has never been resurfaced since. Almost all of the residents are in their 70s or 80s, and several have health and mobility issues. The road surface and pavements are in a dreadful condition, as illustrated by photographs in the petition document. There are wide, shallow trenches where the road surface drops significantly from one side to the other. Much of the road surface is severely cracked, uneven and crumbling. There are broad areas where the tarmac has worn away, exposing bare concrete. There is a drain so poorly positioned that rainwater runs around it and builds up outside properties at the road's lowest point. Vulnerable residents have needed emergency assistance with sandbags. The pavement is infested with weeds, grasses, and extensive areas of slippery moss. And there are no dropped curbs in the part of South Close that leads to the private road and the town centre. This means that some residents have no choice but to use the road to walk in. Our biggest concern is not the appearance of the road, but the safety of residents and other users, which we believe is compromised. Car drivers and cyclists risk skidding. Pedestrians are forced to navigate a hazardous road surface or pavement just to be able to get out of their road. I'll give you two brief examples. One female resident in her late 80s with severe health and mobility issues needs to use a walker to get out for exercise and any social contact. To see her trying to navigate the uneven surfaces, not to mention the traffic, is both heartbreaking and frightening. And another female resident, also in her late 80s, has a mobility scooter that she feels unable to use because of the discomfort, and the road surface also actually loosens its nuts and bolts when she's tried to use it. So I conclude by requesting that the minutes record the following points. We acknowledge the council's budgetary constraints and the need to prioritise accordingly, but note that it seems that smaller roads with lower volumes of traffic are unlikely ever to make it onto the priority list. We request that the road and pavements in South Close are repaired, resurfaced and maintained going forward. The substantial risk of accidents and consequential injury is our most pressing concern, but also none of us would welcome the cost in both time and money from potential compensation claims. Thank you for listening. I hope you have heard. I urge you to consider the petition favourably and take action to address the concerns raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davis. We are now moving on to a presentation by the Chief Fire Officer. I would like to introduce Wayne Bocock, Chief Fire Officer of the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Centre. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lady Mayor. Good evening, councillors. Hopefully I won't keep you too long. I know you've got a busy agenda, and thank you very much for making the time to allow me to come and talk to you about the work of the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service and the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Authority, of which all of your members obviously represent your local authority on that fire authority. So first slide, please, Madeline, thank you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Royal Berkshire's performance. Obviously, some of the work that we do that you would expect us to do, prevention, response and protection. We're coming into a key corporate planning stage, which involves Berkshire-wide public consultation called our Community Risk Management Plan. And I'll talk a little bit about the outgoing plan and the new plan. Our financial position, which I'm sure you'll have some sympathy with, and some of the sector-wide challenges that we face as an organisation, and hopefully leave some time at the end for questions. I also have two questions that were pre-submitted by councillors, which I'll pick up during that question phase. Thank you. Next slide. I thought I'd touch initially on a little bit of performance specific to Wokingham. For the sharp-eyed of you, you will see that some of the numbers don't add up. That's purely because the top line are all incidents, whereas the numbers below are specific categories of incidents which we focus more closely on. So that is an intentional error, I can assure you. So what I've done there, just for your reference within the Wokingham Borough, is compare performance figures between Q1, so April to June in 2021, to Q1 of April to June 2022. So you can see the trend line between the incidents. Primary fires are more serious incidents that we attend, where there is a risk or danger to life, property, or assets of value to somebody, an incurable value. Secondary fires are lower categories of incidents, We generally, outdoor fires, bin fires, that kind of thing, we generally get more of those in a quarter, but you can see the relatively low number there for Wokingham. Road traffic collisions are the other category, as you can see, and then the performance against our response standard. So as you can see, in all incidents across Wokingham, there's been a slight increase since Q1 of 2021. That is marginal, really, that kind of 50 odd incidents that we've seen an increase in. And then you can also see that the broadly static, a slight increase in primary fires in the first quarter of the year. These are generally seasonal as well, so we do see higher numbers in certain quarters of the year than we do through the summer and the autumn months, obviously. So winter months and spring months, we do see a higher number of primary fires. And as you'd expect, with road traffic collisions, we did see more road traffic collisions from about this time of year through winter. Q1, April to June, a relatively steady or static month in terms of road traffic collisions. The exception to that being, of course, fast roads and the M4, what we refer to as fast roads, and the constant level of incidents and accidents that we see in those areas. The response standard that we aim for is an appliance to an incident within 10 minutes on 75% of occasions. So you can see there that last year we were struggling more than this year, but we're still almost 5% away from our target there. Some of the reasons and the cause of that are generally we are a very lean fire and rescue service in comparison to other organisations or other fire and rescue services. So we deploy our resources in a very efficient way. What that means is when we're deployed on other incidents, the next nearest appliance often can't, or fire engine often can't hit that response standard within 10 minutes. So it is a very fine balance in terms of how busy we are in a quarter. The busier we are, the more difficult it is to hit the response standard unless the fire engines are right on top of all the incidents, which rarely occurs, obviously, once they're out and about and moving around. So work to do in the response standard, particularly in the Wokingham Borough. In terms of safe and well visits, this is where we interact a lot with your adult social care services and community safety partnerships. And this is about our prevention campaign and how we support people to live independently and try and educate and advise people not to have a fire in the first place, which is much better than the response. So prevention is better than cure. And that's the approach that we try and take. You can see a significant improvement in safe and well visits through Q1 this year. A lot of that is pandemic related, and during the pandemic we had to move from physical visits to the vulnerable to either remote visits or online visits or leafleting or working through relatives or carers. So the physical number was much reduced, and as you can see, thankfully we've managed to pick that up this year. And again, fire safety audits is really about our protection work and how we inspect the built environment, how we work with your planning teams, building control, enforcement, and the fire and rescue service is the primary enforcing authority under the fire safety order, which is now part of the Building Safety Act. And we carry out a number of audits that hopefully proactively are about supporting business to stay in business, around having good fire safety risk assessments in place to keep their businesses safe from fire. There's some quite heavy statistics about, in terms of SME, small to medium enterprise businesses, 3/4 who suffer a reasonable size fire never go back into business because the loss can be so catastrophic. So we work with businesses to try and educate them and support them, but also to make sure that the health and safety environment for their workforce or members of the public visiting those organisations is appropriate and that people will be safe in those buildings. When that fails and businesses don't comply, then we do have an enforcement role as well as a primary enforcing authority. So we prohibit use of buildings or take legal action against responsible people in those buildings. Fortunately, that is few and far between. People tend to listen and act, but on occasion we do have successful track record in prosecutions, particularly working with the local courts as well. One of the other elements that is slightly less relevant for Wokingham Borough is the number of high-rise residential building inspections. As you can imagine, after the Grenfell Tower tragedy, there's been a significant government campaign executed through local fire and rescue authorities to get out and inspect and audit lots of high-rise buildings. We've been doing that across the county, to some great success, actually. Out of 196 high-rise buildings across Berkshire, there are 24 that are in interim measures, and pleased to report that none of those are in your borough. Some are very close, but none of those are in your borough, and we continue to work with those buildings and responsible people on a day-to-day basis to make sure that they take remedial action and those interim measures can become a permanent solution. Next slide, please, Madeline. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the prevention proposals that were and how we've done against those that were in our integrated risk management plan corporate strategy, which runs from 2019 to 2023, and it's due for review. So a little bit of a headline that equality of access is at the heart of all the prevention activity that we undertake. So we try and make sure that everybody can access that relevant information because, as I said before, prevention is better than cure. We introduced a risk-based inspection programme for our safe and well visits to make sure we could really reach the most vulnerable people in our communities, strengthen relationships and partnerships with all of the unitary authorities across Berkshire to make sure that we could work with your adult social care teams and make sure we really were targeting those who would benefit most from the advice that we could give. We also have an adults referral programme, which is county-wide with all the unitary authorities. Again, most of our work around what we call safe and well visits comes from referrals from your organisations or from other partner organisations like health, police, education. And we use those referrals because, again, the quality of referral is much better and we can be more certain that we're targeting the most vulnerable people in our communities. We've had quite a focus on road safety and particularly motorcycle safety, which is an issue that Berkshire suffers with. So we have quite an extensive motorcycle safety campaign. So biker down, be a better biker, and we do a lot of work around that. And we run a lot of those courses from the community fire stations, including the Wokingham Fire Station. And then our activities obviously support children and young people. So education again, and early education, early intervention is by far the best way to sow seeds for later in life and to influence people's behaviour later in life. We've seen that with over a 42% reduction nationally in domestic property fires. That goes right back to 1999-2000 when Fire and Rescue Services started to do key stage 1 and 2 education programmes around fire safety. We continue to do that with children and young people, particularly in Berkshire through road and water safety education programmes. We run a very successful fire cadet scheme and we run fire safe schemes, which is about educating young people against the dangers of fire setting and arson type behaviour. And I'm sure you'll kind of join me in agreeing that certainly the water safety education is significantly important, considering some of the tragic incidents we've suffered across Berkshire in the last few months, all too frequent. And there is a very strong partnership with the unitary authorities, Canals and River Trust and British Waterways in order to put life rings, warning and forming stations up along particularly the banks of the Thames and the Kennet and Avon to make sure that people are at least aware and understand what to do in the event that something does tragically go wrong. In terms of our response proposals in that integrated risk management plan, we said we were going to undertake a review of our specialist water rescue capability, and pleased to state that we will be putting an additional water rescue capability into the east of the county, either at Slough or Langley. That will strengthen the existing highly capable, very technical water rescue capability that we operate from Caversham Road and Reading. So that will complement that capability, particularly timely as a result of some of those tragic incidents that I just mentioned. We said we were going to undertake a review of our incident support capability. That really is around how effectively we command and manage incidents and certainly large-scale incidents. That work is currently ongoing within the service, and there's also a collaborative piece of work across the Thames Valley Fire and Rescue Services. So we're working with Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire on that, so that again we can have very strong what we call interoperability if we go to incidents with those other services, which we frequently do. We also subscribe to the apprenticeship levy, as all local authorities do, who obviously have budgets that meet the threshold. Very pleased to say that this year was the first year that we introduced 18 new whole-time firefighters who all came in through the apprenticeship levy, and we are now supporting them in the early stages of their career to complete their apprenticeship to become competent firefighters. So again, good use of public money, very, very good way to drive consistency into the fire sector by lots of fire and rescue services adopting the same approach. And also, we talked about over-border working briefly with other fire and rescue services. We have a multi-agency exercise schedule, as you would expect, to make sure that our firefighters, A, know the risk in Berkshire, but B, know how to work together with firefighters from other fire and rescue services as effectively as possible, so that we can assure the communities that we serve and scrutiny through the fire authority that we are absolutely training, understand our risks, training hard and providing the best quality service that we can to the communities of Berkshire. I've touched on protection work already, but just to kind of top and tail that, we have a thing called a risk-based inspection programme. It's a nationally, there's a national definition for what that is. We reviewed ours towards the end of last year and earlier into this year. And again, pleased to say that we've launched a new risk-based inspection programme that complies with the latest thinking within the sector, has recently been inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Service. We're expecting the outcome and the results of that at any moment. But what that does in terms of your scrutiny and overview of the Fire and Rescue Service in Berkshire is gives you some assurance that we are A, cognizant of all the risks that exist across Berkshire, but B, then we categorise and risk prioritise them in the most effective way so that we can go out and engage with those organisations that present a risk to the public or to firefighters across Berkshire. We can work with those sites to make sure that they are safe, they are effective, and also, if the worst does happen, that we are effectively prepared to respond and deal with an incident as swiftly and as professionally as possible. There is a lot of legislation changing going on. I've touched on it a little bit around the built environment and fire safety. So a building safety bill was launched last year that has now received royal assent. We have the Building Safety Act and we have the Fire Safety Act that have both come into force. Again, they are intended to prevent a tragedy like Grenfell Tower occurring again in the future. One of the things of relevance for all the unitary authorities across Berkshire in relation to that is under the Building Safety Act, a building safety regulator is to be established that will draw in people from your planning teams, your building control teams, as well as fire safety inspecting officers under the regulator to make sure that we can apply end-to-end oversight and scrutiny of both the design, construction and operation of buildings that would pose a risk to either the occupiers or users of the building or members of the public who might go into those buildings. It is a very, very fast-moving piece of work, quite complex legislation, which means we are probably going to have to strengthen both the number of fire safety inspecting officers we have within Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service, but also strengthen the close ties that we already enjoy with your organisation and make sure we work together seamlessly and very professionally, keeping up to speed with those new policies. And of course, finally, on protection, you would expect us to push and advocate the use of sprinklers in buildings. There are lots of myths about sprinklers and if they're going to flood my property if they go off. There is an abundance of scientific evidence and research that demonstrates sprinklers are 98% effective in their deployment and use. They are easy to retrofit. They are even easier to design into new builds, and the cost is much lower when they're designed into new builds. In terms of public safety, preventing loss to business by a business not being out of business for as long, a sprinkler can contain a fire much more quickly. And also protecting firefighters. They make the actual firefighting operation safer for firefighters as well. I cannot strongly enough advocate the use of sprinklers in buildings, and we will continue to do so. Might be some more bullet points on that, Madeline. There are. It's okay. I didn't know there were animations either. So our corporate plan runs from 19 to 23. It sets out the authority's ambition and strategy. It's based on some very sound risk analysis of socio-demographics, super output area census data, raft of information, past incident data, and it tells us where we should have our resources to best protect the communities of Royal Berkshire. It is a legal responsibility of a fire and rescue authority to produce an integrated risk management plan. That terminology is now changed to corporate risk management plan. Ours ends in April next year, so later this year you will see a public consultation version of that come out. We'll be presenting the consultation version to the fire authority in December, and then it will go out to public consultation for between 8 and 12 weeks at the time, and it will come into effect next year. So we're currently really in the thick of the risk analysis that we have to undertake to produce that document. And I would again implore you to have a view of that when it comes out. It will be sent out to all unitary authorities across Berkshire, but to feedback on that, broadest possible feedback makes it a more meaningful document. So just really a headline that a new corporate risk management plan will be coming out in April next year. It would be remiss of me not to touch on the financial position. It sounds like we're doing a hell of a lot of really good work. We pride ourselves on having great support from the fire authority, being a highly professional organisation, but very much, as you will be finding in your business, it is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the level, the capacity and the resources that you would expect us to have in place as an emergency service. We're a relatively small organisation, just under 39 million as an operating budget. We were fortunate last year to get some precept flexibility. We were one of 8 fire and rescue services last year that could increase our council tax precept on a Band D property by £5. Normally we're capped at the 2%. We remain in the lowest 8 precepting authorities in England as a fire and rescue authority, even with that precept uplift. We also have the 4th lowest level of reserves as a fire authority in England as a percentage of our revenue budget. And that is, it's a figure, whilst it means that we don't have a lot of resource, I'm quite proud to talk about that because it's public money. My view is that if we shouldn't be building up high levels of reserves, we should be using reserves or having reserves other than general reserves to actually commit to invest in the service in the future. And if we sat on reserves, then there's a question about, you know, as the chief executive, why have I not spent or used those reserves as effectively as possible? So 4th lowest level, not a comfortable place to be, but morally probably the right place to be. We are already, for the first time in a long number of years, forecasting about 650k deficit in the budget this year, which we are obviously working through now. But that doesn't include the unfunded pay awards. And some of you may be aware that the Fire Brigade Union are about to ballot their members for industrial action over pay. Genuinely believe that fire and rescue service pay, certainly for firefighters, needs to be increased. It's fallen behind staggeringly in the last 12 years. And we are engaging with MPs and the Fire Minister on that matter. But pay and conditions are negotiated nationally for fire and rescue service staff. And an unfunded pay award for every 1% has an additional £200,000 impact on my operational workforce budget. So that 650k could well increase. We've budgeted 2.5% for a pay award this year. That is unlikely to be anywhere near the actual pay award in the end. So financial position is increasingly tight. I said I'd touch on some sector-wide challenges. I'm very conscious of time. The government has launched a white paper on a reform of the fire and rescue service. It is very welcome to see a review and the reform of the role of the fire and rescue service. As a professional firefighter of 30 years almost, I genuinely believe that the fire and rescue service can add more value even than it does now, but that needs some kind of national review. The government have actually signalled their intentions to start that review, but again, that will bring some challenges. They're talking about governance reviews within there. They're talking about the role of chief fire officers and whether there's enough independence, the funding mechanisms into fire and rescue services, and a variety of other matters that are quite interesting, creating some industrial unrest, I think it would be fair to say, but it's one of the sector-wide issues that we're dealing with. A professional body that operates in the fire and rescue service called the National Fire Chiefs Council, of which I'm part, has also produced a strategy for a future vision for the fire and rescue service to articulate some of those things I've just talked about. So the additional value that fire and rescue services can add to the public that we serve. For example, things like emergency medical response and support of the ambulance service. There are a raft of things that we could be doing. So again, the government are considering that vision document from the National Fisheries Council. And then finally, the climate impact is something that all fire and rescue services, and I'm sure all public authorities are looking at. Climate challenge has two impacts for me, as I can see it, as a chief executive of Fire and Rescue Service. One is the operational impact. We are seeing many more wildfires, fires in the open. We had 500 calls on one day into Thames Valley Fire Control Service. That was for the 3 services in the Thames Valley. That is a staggering call volume for one day. We are being deployed significantly more to wildfires than we ever have in the past. And we're just about to come into a period of being deployed to more and more flooding incidents. So the demand on the service, we are absolutely seeing the impact of climate change. Now, on the flip side of that, talked about reserves and budget. I have an aging estate. I run diesel fire engines everywhere, all over the county at relatively high speed. So trying to green the organisation is, again, quite challenging in terms of introducing sustainable technology or sustainable resources into the estate. And the fire sector is relatively small, so the innovation in terms of electric or hybrid vehicle technology, again, is quite difficult to come by. So we feel that we're playing catch up with that, but we're currently working with a sustainability consultancy and having a sustainability audit done for the organisation to create a future strategy about how we're going to start to invest and tackle some of those issues, particularly around our own organisation. Very much.
Thank you. I'm now handing over to some members' questions. I've got one from Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dupre. Thank you.
Good evening. Thankfully short. What plans are being made to make the fire service more environmentally friendly? Solar panels and buildings, electric vehicles will make the fire service more energy efficient, but are you also using biodegradable foam and other materials?
Thank you, Councillor. Follows on from the point I finished on in the presentation. We are finding buildings, electric vehicles, etc. That is probably slower than I would like, particularly in the estate side of the organisation. Very pleased to say that we've invested a lot of the capital capacity of the organisation in the development of 3 fire stations that all have photovoltaic cells, some have grey water recovery, etc. So where we can in new builds, we are developing the buildings to be more sustainable. And that has a significant impact on the revenue budget because we reduce our overheads as well. Unfortunately, the remainder of the estate, so another 14 buildings, are significantly aging. And we have a condition survey that says we need to spend about £15 million in the budget of about 1.2 to spend on those buildings. We are just about to reprofile that as a result of the sustainability audit and work out how we can accelerate the investment in the older estate on 2 parts. One is the environmental sustainability, and the second is on the inclusive facilities in those buildings. To attract a more diverse workforce, we need to improve the facilities within those buildings as well. So there is an audit going on at the minute that is going to support us to increase the sustainability of the buildings. In terms of the fleet, we have already purchased 3 electric vehicles, 3 hybrid vehicles, and 6 new vehicles that have come onto the fleet this year. But we have what we call a white fleet and a red fleet. So white fleet, generally the vehicles we run around in every day. Red fleet, the fire engines that run around. There is very little innovation at the moment in terms of either hydrogen or electric vehicles for firefighting. So we're doing what we can in the white fleet. And we are keeping a close eye on some work that's going on in London and Oxfordshire around hydrogen and electric vehicles for firefighting. And again, we'll build that into our fleet strategy. Biodegradable foams and other materials. We have already improved the foam that we use. There is work to do, but again, I think it's the innovation into the sector is very limited. Fire and rescue as a sector, either from science or engineering, is a very small sector, very low returns for the private sector. So we're often quite slow to see some of the benefits of new technology coming through into the fire sector. We have moved away from environmentally harmful foams, which we were using as recently as probably 10 years ago. Now we are into more environmentally friendly foam solutions, etc. But in terms of biodegradable, we're not fully there yet.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Barry Papp, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of my residents recently suffered abusive and threatening calls and text messages, which were reported to the police. Following extensive inquiries by the police, the issues were resolved, and the police informed the resident to contact the fire brigade to assess fire safety in her house. The resident then contacted the Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service, who were most helpful in installing free fire alarms throughout the property, and informed the resident that the Thames Valley Police should have contacted the fire brigade service to check fire safety at her house. Is there a communication disconnect between Thames Valley Police and your department, sir? As Thames Valley Police simply left it with the resident to contact the fire brigade.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, I'm sorry to hear that your constituent suffered that abuse, but also in answer to the question, I think on this occasion, the service that your resident received was less than ideal. We've since taken that up with Thames Valley Police and had quite a full answer to that question. Pleased to say that we were able to support your resident as soon as we were made aware of the situation. And the results that I've had would lead me to the answer of no, there isn't a communication breakdown between us and Thames Valley Police. They have been very well receiving of the question that we raised. They have identified that they have a high number of new police officers, a lot of them young in their service, not necessarily in years, but young in their service, who are learning the job, and often with the amount of demand and how busy the police are, some of those connections between organisations, if a new police officer isn't familiar with them, can sometimes be missed. The response we've had from the local policing area and the chief inspector there is that he's going to make sure that those referral pathways and the expectations are made clear to his new officers, and that training takes place, and has thanked us very much for raising the issue with him. So I don't believe there is a communication breakdown. I think it's probably an experience and a reminder issue for policing. Yeah.
Councillor Firminger, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I've got a very, very quick question. And I thank you for your lovely and very informative presentation. But in your presentation, you said a number of SME businesses after a fire do not restart. Do you work with the insurance industry? And if so, how?
Thank you, Councillor. No, we don't directly as an individual fire and rescue service, but the sector more broadly works with an organisation called the Fire Industry Association, which is a membership body which is populated by a number of insurance companies who feed their information and intelligence back in through the Fire Industry Association. And that does find its way through to fire and rescue services, so that when we are engaging through our protection officers with businesses, we can use some of the data and the trends that are coming from the insurance industry to inform them about risks to their business. So there is a connection on a membership body national level, but not directly between Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service and individual insurers or the insurance agency. And part of the reason behind that, just very briefly, is obviously we have a primary enforcing authority status as well. So there's a fine line to tread between the advice that we give and the work that we engage in with private industry, when we may also have an enforcement role under a piece of legislation.
Councillor Cunningham, please. Cunningham. Sorry.
That's all right. We'll make friends over my name sooner or later, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Just to go back to basics, actually, really, with the presentation you made, and thank you for it. Could you tell us, what are the primary causes of the 30% of shouts that you don't manage to make within 10 minutes? And are there any measures that councillors, particularly Wokingham, could consider that might aid you in meeting those targets?
Thank you, councillor. There is a mix of the primary causes of those fires. So often we attend still a significant number of automatic fire alarms. We've reduced the number by revising our response strategy to automatic fire alarms. The cause of which is often either a faulty alarm system, poor management of property, or a smoke detector going off for, a controllable or a spurious reason. Once we deploy a fire appliance to an incident, we lose it until that incident's closed. So if hypothetically there was an incident in this building and the Wokingham fire appliance was deployed to an automatic fire alarm, you would get the next nearest appliance, which would obviously affect the response standard. So the majority of our incidents are the lower severity incidents, but a broad mix. So you saw me talk about the secondary fires, so secondary fires and automatic fire alarms. In terms of the support, therefore, around secondary fires particularly and automatic fire alarms, when we work with your neighbourhood teams or through education as well, making sure that both young people and the kind of design of simple things about where you would put refuse bins, or what happens when school children are moving in and out of school, that kind of thing. We can often identify hotspots of where incidents will occur, working together with a local authority to design out, kind of traps, I suppose, or bottlenecks is something that we very much welcome doing with local authorities. And then in terms of automatic fire alarms, again, working with your planning departments and building control teams, particularly planning departments, around the design of buildings and making sure the appropriate standard of fire detection, but also the management systems that are put in place within buildings, which can be picked up, particularly under the building safety regulator now, between planning departments and building control functions, is definitely going to be a role where we'll work closer together, and we would very much appreciate local authority support in that space.
Thank you. With Mr. Bocott's permission, we've run out of time for this item, but if the members would like to extend it by 10 minutes, would I like to have a show of hands? It's on point 4.2.21. We'd like to extend this by 10 minutes to finish off the questioning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bocott. I've got a few more questions. I've got Councillor Bill Soane, please.
Thank you very much. I won't take up too much time, but let me just say this is a personal thank you as well as a question. But before I get to the question, 5 weeks ago, just about, my wife was walking along the Kennet and Avon Canal, and it was in quite a remote area, and she tripped and fell, which resulted in a broken hip. Although the ambulance service could get to her, they couldn't remove her because of undergrowth and a number of silos that needed to be negotiated. They couldn't get the air ambulance out because there was nowhere for it to land, so they called the fire service. And by the time they arrived, my wife had Entonox and morphine, so she was on quite a high, and she was quite delighted to see, her words, not mine, 4 hunky firemen turn up to get her out. And they did this in a most professional way and compassionate way, and also a humorous way, I must say. And I will mention this, and I apologise if anybody's offended, but when she was being carried out, she said that she'd been laying on the ground and her head was on hard surface. When they picked her up in the chair and she was able to put her head back, she said how comfortable it was. And one fire officer said, "You don't want to know where your head is resting." But that was her, not mine. But I would just like to say, and they thank you to the crew that came out and actually got her out of that situation. But the question, the question I will ask is that the ambulance crew and the fire crew were able to find exactly where she was because she had 3 words on her phone. And I think at the time the call is put through, the operator who takes the call asks if she has those 3 words. And I'd like to just say that it certainly worked because they were able to pinpoint exactly where she was. So is it something that the fire brigade would sort of encourage people to have? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Glad that we were able to help and wish your wife a speedy recovery. What 3 words is fantastic, and I think your example and your wife's experience is a fantastic example of when what 3 words can be extremely useful. If you've got a road name or a house number or a road number, it's very easy to pinpoint people. When people are out and about in rural areas or in the countryside, what 3 words really does come into its own, as well as in those urban areas as well. We absolutely advocate the use of what 3 words, as you have stated. We use it in our Thames Valley Fire Control Service. Control operators will ask people if they use what 3 words. Unbelievably, there are quite a lot of people who do not have the what 3 words app. So I have a work phone and it's automatically installed on my work phone that is a controlled device. So yes, we fully endorse the use of what 3 words, and your example exemplifies how valuable it can be.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you very much. I was very interested to hear you talk about the potential for extending the fire services remit to help the ambulance service. I recall that was mentioned a couple of years ago as well. I'm just wondering how long it's likely to be before that actually happens.
Councillor, we did assist the ambulance service and continue to do some in some cases. So we use firefighters or fire rescue service staff who volunteer do actually drive ambulances and support South Central Ambulance Service when their crewing is short. That's something that started through the pandemic. Prior to that, there was a national pilot and trial, and Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service took part in that in terms of deploying fire engines to cardiac arrests or certain categories of medical emergency if we were closer than an ambulance. So the thing I would stress very clearly is that the Fire and Rescue Service is not a replacement for the ambulance service. We do not have ambulances. We cannot convey patients to hospital, and people who need an ambulance, those that genuinely call an ambulance for the right reasons, need definitive medical care, which is conveying to a hospital. So it has been talked about for a long time. I also stated that the terms and conditions of firefighters, so that's their role maps, the job descriptions, as well as the remuneration that they receive, are nationally negotiated. This is something that has been kicked around, much to my professional frustration, for many, many, many years. And it seems to be a bit of an impasse. The document that the National Fire Chiefs Council, together with the Local Government Association, have produced, which is the future vision called Fit for the Future, includes renegotiating or redeveloping the job description of a firefighter, addressing the funding formula of how fire and rescue authorities are funded across England, which is partly through revenue support grant from the government and then predominantly through council tax precept. But addressing that funding formula, both of those things together then would lead to the job description being evaluated and effectively the stumbling block being the appropriate level of pay for firefighters to take on that additional skill set, receive the right training, and then be able to formally support ambulance services where they need it up and down the country. So long way of saying I don't know how long that piece of string is, but it is frustratingly long. It's been around for a long time, but at least we've now got a coherent vision strategy that has been put forward to government to see what their response to that is.
Thank you. Councillor John Kaiser, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief Officer, there was a very serious fire in my ward about 18 months ago where a block of flats burnt down and are currently sitting there condemned. There are 9 blocks of these flats, 54 homes, which are all rented, owned by a large insurance company. What I'm asking is, who's responsible for checking those flats? Because we still have 24-hour, believe it or not, 24-hour fire marshals wandering around those flats. And I'm getting a lot of flack from people with regards to the quality of the fire marshals looking in their windows, all those sorts of things, but they are living very much petrified. And a lot of these people are affordable, it's affordable housing basically, so they don't have the resource just to up sticks and move away. So I'd like to know is what responsibility does the fire service have for that?
Thank you, Councillor. So the legal responsibility rests with the responsible person who either owns or operates the building. So they are required to produce a fire risk assessment. If the building falls under the fire safety order, they will have done that because our responsibility as a fire and rescue service then is for fire safety inspecting officers to go out and carry out what we call an audit on the fire risk assessment that is in place. There are clearly some kind of issues in those buildings if the responsible person believes that they need to have a fire warden or a waking watch or whatever it is. But any remedial measures such as fire wardens will have been agreed with the fire safety inspecting officers as being adequate in order to underpin the fire risk assessment that the building has in place. So effectively, as long as the fire risk assessment is suitable and sufficient, then in terms of legislation, there is little or nothing the Fire and Rescue Service can do. It is when the fire risk assessment isn't suitable and sufficient, then we would take action either by issuing an enforcement notice, prohibiting parts of the building, or taking legal action against that responsible person. What I can guarantee you is because there was a fire in one of the other buildings there, my fire protection team will absolutely have been out and carried out audits on that building, and they will be up to date. But if I can take the names of those buildings from you, I'll also go back and double check and make sure that's the case.
That would be very helpful.
Thank you. We've just got time for one last question from Councillor Clive Jones. And if you wouldn't mind, is it right if the other ones are written ones and you can written answers at a later date? That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wayne. It was good to meet you earlier on, and thank you very much for your presentation. It's been very thorough, very interesting, and it would be really nice to see copies of it that we can have a look at our leisure. Good luck with your consultation on the community risk management plan. I'm sure you'll get that done by, I think you said April next year, wasn't it, or something like that. So thank you for taking the time to come here this evening, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bocock. And can I thank you very much for your time this evening, all the information you've given us, particularly on prevention, and keep on the great work. That's lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now going to call a 5-minute comfort break before we carry on, if that's all right with it. Well, thank you. 5-minute comfort break. Oh, I do need one.
That's very nice.
Sorry.
That's very nice.
Yeah, well, sorry, I'll go that way.
Cheers, thanks.
No, just like going to say thank you very much.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, sorry, it went out.
Thank you for that. We're now moving on to Treasury Management Outturn reports. Can the members note that we have revised recommendation for this item that has been tabled this evening? I invite Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dupre, Executive Member for Finance, to move the report.
Good evening, everyone. As the Mayor has just stated, I'd like to point out that we had this amendment put in where recommendation 2 is being removed. Recommendation 2 was recommendation 1 when the report was sent to the audit committee, and it was amended to become the new recommendation 1 that we see here in front of us on the purple sheets. So the older recommendation 1, which is now recommendation 2 on here, has been crossed out and is no longer needed and was not approved by the audit committee. Okay, everybody got that? No, right.
Councillor Imogen, do you have a seconder, please?
Do I need to have that seconded?
No, I mean a seconder for the.
Well, let me see. This report is a retrospective report for years 2021 and 2022 and was judged against the Treasury Management Strategy. It was approved by the Audit Committee in July, and it is a good news message. It shows that the amount of external borrowing the Council was predicted to need has declined. This has reduced some of the potential impact on our general fund, as that is where the interest payments are made from. It is also where we are seeing the most financial pressures at the moment. It shows that the investments we have are a benefit to the Council. However, the internal borrowing to capital finance requirement is outside of the target, meaning that the Council is using more of its own internal money to finance its needs, but it is still better than borrowing from external sources. It was approved by the Audit Committee, and I ask this Council to please accept this report.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder? Councillor Jones, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I have nothing.
Sorry. Can we ask if anybody wishes to speak against the report? Thank you. Thank you. You have a right to speak now. Would you like to reserve your right till after everyone's spoken?
I'll speak now.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have nothing to add to what Councillor Shepherd-Dupre has said. I second the adoption of the report.
Councillor David Davis, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. When I first considered the agenda item having been sat on the Audit Committee, I'd seen in item 1 the clarification was provided that all the indicators were met, excluding those that Councillor Shepherd-Dupre has pointed out, which were in fact positive. However, I also felt that the fact of these approved indicators is such a substantive part of the audit. I had understood that item 2 had been left in to essentially state that all approved indicators had been met that mattered. It is now stuck into item 1, and the layman reading it quickly will probably not understand what is in item 1. So I would like to object not to the report, but to the way it's been amended immediately before this meeting. And also in item 3, as it is now, I'll also note the net indebtedness of 72 million and hope that Councillor Debay in her new role and her colleagues will use that figure rather than the 750 million that's been used previously in public statements as to our indebtedness.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen, did nobody else wishes to speak on this report? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Councillor Kaiser, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I guess what I'd like to say is I told you so. I'd like to thank Graham and his team. It's a fabulous job they've done. Looking at these numbers, I mean, overall reduction in borrowing. And just really to touch on the fact that the Chief Financial Officer's in his annual council report actually said, heading into 2022-23 financial year, the financial standing of the council remains robust. Achieved through years of good financial management, the council have built up financial resilience and sustainability. I accept we are all faced with a lot of tough challenges, but I believe the Conservatives left this council in the very best place financially, with the issues to deal with the issues, and I would suggest that we, as a party, or I would have been quite happy to steer the council through these tough times if I was given the chance. I just hope Clive Jones, the new leader of the council, continues to deliver the high quality services the residents have come to expect and at a reasonable cost. But also remember, to enable him to do this, the council must remain solvent. Wokingham is not a council in crisis, unlike many others. We have high levels of usable reserves and high levels of control over our revenue spending, and with a sustainable capital programme for growth for the future. My advice to you, Clive, is stop pointing at the past and get on with dealing with the future, and don't cook it up.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on this report? Thank you. Councillor Maria G, please.
Yeah, I think you just asked for people who are speaking against, but it sounds to me as though the opposition is speaking for. And this is just under 4.2.13.1. You're allowed to speak against. Otherwise, it goes straight to the vote. I'd just like to make that quite clear. We don't need this sort of grandstanding here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen Debray, you wish to? Sorry.
Yeah.
Councillor Jorgensen has put her hand up.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to point out that in a previous meeting, Councillor Jones, when we were discussing the frequency of elections, did precisely what you've accused ourselves.
Sorry, can I just say that there's no point of order being made by Councillor Jorgensen? Does she wish to make a point of order here or not?
No, I'm just reminding you.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd Dupre, please.
Well, it seems that people have forgotten what this is about, and this is about this report. The amendment was not one that was agreed by the audit committee, which is why it's been crossed out. We went through it quite meticulously. There were 4 items agreed, and it didn't include the item 2 at that point. So that's why this is here. But apart from that, it's about this report, which is a retrospective report anyway, and we just need to note it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to go to the vote now? Can I ask the members to vote for the report? Carried. Thank you. Now moving on to Climate Emergency Action Plan Annual Progress Report, July 2022. I invite Councillor Sarah Kerr, Executive Member for the Climate Emergency, to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I want to begin by saying a few words of thanks to every single member in this council chamber and those who were members back in July 2019, when we unanimously declared a climate emergency. Thank you. Unbelievably, we still live in a world of climate change deniers and sceptics. So to know that this crucial agenda has the full support of Wokingham Borough Council politicians is a fantastic base upon which to build. I'd like to mention Gregor specifically. Taking on this agenda from a standing start was always going to be tough, especially with all the conflicting priorities we have to deal with as local politicians and the lack of central government support. And of course, our fantastic officer team who worked so hard and have implemented a number of projects and put together the reporting for this priority. The team were acknowledged for their work by receiving a highly commended accolade at the MJ Awards. We now need to take our response to the next level. Officers have worked very hard on implementing the excellent suggestions from the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, and I'd like to thank Andy Croy for his involvement in this process as well. There is still work to do, including incorporating a roadmap, but we have taken on board the comments from Scrutiny and previous task and finish groups and kept some SMART targets and have a clearer view of what the projected carbon savings would be through actions in the plan. What this plan shows us is a significant gap, and we need to address this gap. There are 3 ways in which we can do this. Do more as a local authority directly and within our sphere of influence. Work in partnership to form a One Wokingham approach where collective responsibility is taken and actioned. And lobby government to remove the barriers that still exist. We are putting together business cases for some new initiatives, such as a home decarbonisation service, a wider home decarbonisation and energy plan, active travel plans, and a reusable period product scheme. Underpinning everything that we do is the emerging behaviour change strategy in order to help our communities transition to a more sustainable future. And sitting alongside our climate mitigation work is our approach to climate adaptation. All of this is being considered alongside the financial implications that come with them. We also are looking to work collaboratively with organisations who share our vision to becoming net zero. We cannot do this alone, and developing strong partnerships is crucial to our success. The Council cannot fix climate change without wider involvement, and we all need to be part of the journey through a one-working approach. Finally, I implore our new Prime Minister to listen to local governments and provide us with the statutory obligations we desperately need to tackle the climate crisis. Net zero is unachievable without local action. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. And Councillor Mickleborough. Does anybody wish to vote against the agreement? Councillor, sorry. Andrew Mickleborough. Councillor Mickleborough, would you like to reply now or reserve your?
I'd like to reply now, please, Madam Mayor. Thank you. 3 months after being elected as a councillor, I was privileged to support the July 2019 Declaration of Climate Emergency. In 2020, I joined the Task and Finish Group on Climate Emergency. I want to acknowledge the work of everyone, officers, councillors, including executive members, our residents and many others in the ongoing crafting and implementation of our Climate Emergency Action Plan and progress reports. There is much to be pleased with, but as this progress report states, our action plan as it stands would not achieve net zero. A number of reports, strategies and bills that were not available at the time of earlier iterations are alluded to in the progress report. They reiterate the urgency of taking meaningful action and identify new obligations and opportunities for this council to tackle our climate emergency and move closer to net zero. I hope we will all support the progress report's call for our council to lobby vigorously for wider government support that will enable local authorities to reduce carbon emissions and achieve net zero. Given the importance of ongoing, thorough and careful targeted scrutiny of the Climate Emergency Action Plan and its implementation, I hope this council will support proposals currently before the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee to create a Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I also hope that the section on climate emergency and the conclusions of all reports that come to council will be completed in detail. This has often not been the case. I was pleased to see much progress in this latest iteration of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. I wish to thank officers and the executive member for responding in this iteration to the suggestions and concerns raised at a recent Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting, giving that committee an opportunity to have a direct and positive impact on the document you see before you tonight. One significant omission, inclusion of a roadmap, is, I believe, under active consideration for future iterations. Although we are asked to note this document, everyone here fully appreciates that our Climate Emergency Action Plan is a non-negotiable call for us all to act and play our parts fully in tackling this existential threat to humankind and our ecosystem. I commend this action plan and progress report to one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregor Murray, and can I confirm you're going to be speaking against the report?
I am indeed.
Thank you.
What most people don't realise is that the vast majority of work done on climate emergency and Woking is done by volunteers. Yes, there are many roles within our council that now include climate initiatives as key deliverables, but there are very few dedicated climate officers in our council. The voluntary delivery of our substantial success so far makes what I'm about to say even more disappointing. Recently, an organisation called Climate Emergency UK undertook an independent 6-month review of the climate action plans of every council in the UK. When they announced their findings, Wokingham was ranked in the top 10 out of 400 nationally. That was a phenomenal achievement and a fitting acknowledgement of all of the hard work done by the officers across this council on a voluntary basis. The jubilation rightly felt among the officer group quickly turned to heartache, resentment and despondency, though, when an anonymous person decided that it wasn't acceptable to them that Wokingham had performed so well. The mysterious individual, who I have reason to believe is in this chamber tonight, contacted Climate Emergency UK and provided them with so-called evidence that has not been shared anywhere else that resulted in Woking being downgraded to 22nd overall. Now, 22nd out of 400 is still a phenomenal result. And had you asked Rhiannon Hayes, Diana Tova, Graham Ebers and I in January where we expected to rank, we would have been delighted to come out 22nd. But our officers deserved better. They achieved 8th. For many I spoke to subsequently, being downgraded by an anonymous Judas was a stab in the back. It belittled their effort. It made them question why they had bothered in the first place. The anonymous person who did it knows who they are. They should be ashamed of themselves. It's the one thing trying to belittle a Conservative policy, but what you've actually achieved is to trivialise the hard work, time, energy and countless dedicated officers across this council that you now seek to lead. And you've put their achievement, which they rightly deserve, downwards. You put politics before people's work, time, effort and pride. Personally, I don't understand how you can show your conceited face to the officers. They deserve so much better. Their hard work, dedicated service deserves better. The people of Woking deserve better. They all deserve an apology, but I'm sure they won't get it. You're a disgrace. You want to be a leader, but you've stabbed your officer team in the back. I object to this report because it has been presented by a group who in this council in July of last year voted against the report that is essentially the same as this one.
Excuse me, sorry. I'd like you to stop there, please. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bray.
Thank you. That was very.
Sorry, before you start, can I also confirm you're speaking against the report?
We've had one speech against and therefore I don't need to speak against. I believe that's correct.
That's correct. Thank you.
So I am speaking against something. I'm speaking against Councillor Murray, I think. I am quite gobsmacked by the idea that if you achieved an 8th ranking by not being honest about what was in your plan or open about everything that was in it, and you actually deserve to be 22nd, it's somehow a betrayal of the council. That is an extraordinary position to adopt.
No officer lied in their submission to Climate Emergency UK.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, what? I'm not accusing any officer of having lied.
Sorry, can I stop the debate now and I can take some advisement? Thank you. Everybody sit down. Thank you. I will continue this debate and please, Councillor Murray, please do not interrupt. We respect you when you're speaking and try not to interrupt you. Thank you, Councillor Bray. Will you continue?
I wish to continue by saying that last year we were not happy with the content of the plan because we did not believe it covered everything it needed to cover. And I seem to remember Councillor Murray recently suggesting that we hadn't gone far enough on some things. So we are moving on. We are moving on because we have no choice. We are faced with a climate emergency and we need to act. And that is what we are trying to do as a council generally and as a borough. It's no good the council doing what it can if the people in the borough don't get involved. And I think that we need to take the plan to the next level. And I believe that is the direction we are now going in. So I support this plan, knowing, and I think everybody on this side of the chamber knows, that it's still not a finished work. It's a work in progress. But if we don't make some progress soon, we are going to be in real trouble as a planet. And I just can't believe that you would play games of the nature that you're playing. And I'm very sorry that you've changed the tone and spoken as you have.
Thank you. Councillor Croy, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to start off by saying how much I appreciate the openness and transparency shown by Councillor Kerr since she's taken on this portfolio. I appreciate not only the difficulty in addressing the issues within the old plan and the lack of time available to do so, but also the diligence with which she has approached this task. On a fundamental level, the recommendations before us are so much more honest than last year, and I welcome that. The key recommendation for me is that a more ambitious approach would be required, and that, as Sarah and Councillor Mitchell have acknowledged, is fundamental and didn't really quite get the visibility that it should have done in previous reports. So in other words, the measures set out before us will still fall far short of what we need to do, whatever our rankings by other organisations. Councillor Kern knows this and has had the integrity to acknowledge this. Our cycle lane to net zero still requires far more money and legislative muscle than the council currently possesses. One thing we will have to do is to persuade more people to use public transport. In the plan then, I was disappointed to see that the previous Conservative administration was unsuccessful in its bid for millions or perhaps hundreds of thousands of pounds of bus service improvement funding. What the report does not say is that one reason we lost the funding is because the government will only give funding to councils which promise to commit to some sort of prioritisation of buses over private cars. Conservatives refused to permit this. Conservatives refused to make this commitment. Rightly, the government decided our local Conservatives were simply not serious about bus services and withheld funding. So thanks a lot for that, guys. In one area where the council can have the most influence in encouraging active travel, there has been an almost bestial reaction against the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, the LCWIP, the LUCIWIP. It's fine to want to tweak the proposals to make sure they work, but when members here describe it as part of some sort of war on motorists, then they really need to take a good look at themselves. As a reminder, the LUCIWIP sits within this plan. As a further reminder, the LUCIWIP was also in the plan last year and the year before. And the reason it sits in the plan is because persuading those who can to make fewer journeys by car is going to be fundamental to avoiding the sort of climate catastrophe into that by a boiling summer. This is the case responsible members should be making. The LUCIWIP case and the Woodley one-way fiasco for it points to a more fundamental problem which Councillor Kerr has inherited. Many members of the public are not engaged and do not see the point. This has been fuelled by a politicisation of vital parts of our climate emergency response. The Labour group has long recognised that we need to try and take politics out of our climate emergency response with the Citizens' Assembly and the climate emergency. Only a Citizens' Assembly can hope to give some measure. If I sent you on, okay. We need the Citizens' Assembly. That's
sorry, I'm sorry, Councillor Conway. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hadn't intended to speak on this item, which I had imagined naively would be uncontroversial. It's a report on the progress made. This is an ongoing process. It started off with unanimous support across the council. It's very disappointing that Gregor responded as he did to what I thought was a generous tribute in Sarah's speech to his contribution. Very unfortunate. And I think it would be helpful if we could try to proceed on the basis that this is of fundamental importance to all of us, all of the people we represent. Absolutely fundamental. If we don't actually take action on this, we are in grave dereliction of our duty. And the more we politicise it, the less progress we're going to make. So if we could actually put the politics aside, recognise this is a matter of supreme importance, and if we don't address it, we are letting down not only the people who are here now, but many generations to come. So let's get real, let's get grown up, and let's try and actually make progress.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I refer you to page 48, where it talks about projects? And at the top, it says, these estimated costs are sourced from the existing medium-term financial plan. If you then look at the project, there is the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans with a budget of 2.4 million alongside. Now, whilst the consultation for this local cycling and walking infrastructure plan was going ahead,
officers repeatedly said that none of the proposals were funded. And it was all about getting a shovel-ready scheme so that they could apply to the government for grants, as the Woodlands Avenue is funded by grants. So I'm actually confused. Officers are saying that there is no money allocated to the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, yet this report on page 48 has 2.4 million on local cycling and walking infrastructure plans. They can't both be right. So I would appreciate, maybe not in this forum, but a written answer explaining the difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you. I wasn't intending to speak in this debate either, but I'd just like to straighten out a couple of things that Councillor Croy obviously hasn't read. The Woking Borough proposal for the BSIP funding actually included bus priority lights and included various other bus priority schemes. So you're factually incorrect in saying that we didn't have any bus priority schemes in there. What we didn't have was bus lanes. That's all. The second thing is about the LC whip. There's many good things in the LC whip, but there are also things that will increase congestion and increase carbon and increase pollution. Those are the things that we're objecting to.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Cowan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would say I've always been supportive of both Gregor and Councillor Kerr on this all the way. It's a new policy and it is evolving, but I do have issues with it, slightly different to those that have been raised so far. The action plan has considerable merit, but being mainly aspirational rather than enforceable is actually its biggest weakness. It fails abysmally to address the Council's plans for future housing development and their impact on climate emergency objectives. The aspirational elements come across really as wishful thinking and gives neither planning policy guidance nor material consideration to guide the borough's planning activities. This is a serious shortcoming, and regrettably it is an ongoing problem that predates the climate emergency itself. The plan must provide implementable policies so that the borough can actually achieve its climate aspirations in a way that can gain the full support of the borough's planning process and, more importantly, the country's planning inspectorate. There are many examples of planning approvals over the past 10 years where the borough has paid little attention to climate-related matters such as the risks of flooding, impacts of noise, air pollution, and cutting down mature trees rather than preserving them, all to facilitate development. While housing development is necessary, aspirational policies which can be ignored will be the undoing of this policy in planning terms. How can climate emergency issues be being addressed in the local plan update without being how it will link to the climate emergency aspirations? I believe that all planning related matters in this plan should be integral within the local plan update in a way that the public inquiry process rules them as being fit to guide all development for the plan period. This will give climate emergency policy real teeth in planning. Before closing, I'd like to give a couple of practical examples and why this is both urgent and important. The temporary tree preservation order was requested for Hall Farm for 4,500 houses planned for the Loddon River floodplain, and this was to prevent any premature felling of developers had undertaken on other sites in the past, and the answer was no, they wouldn't do it. The second was building a school in Ardfield Garrison, then denying the children living there the right to go to that school. So now the parents have to drive or bus the children all over the borough instead of walking them to nearby schools. No health benefits in walking or cycling but air and noise pollution in the borough increases. I am supportive of the aspirational vision of this
Excuse
plan.
me, sorry, councillor Garrett, you're out of time. Councillor
Last
Kerrigan.
sentence. Without addressing the significant issues, climate emergency and the local plan update process, I can't fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay Ferris, please.
Thank you, Gareth, for your comments. We had the second meeting of what I call the local plan update working group. And the topic that we had was climate emergency, climate change. It is our intention to ensure that climate emergency activities are future proofed into the new forthcoming local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr, you have a right to reply if you'd like to finish with no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm quite surprised I need to have a right to apply, and there was actually a debate where there was people speaking against. So firstly, I just want to address a couple of things. Andy, Citizens Assembly, no, I appreciate this is something that you're keen to see. I think the best process for that is that we get a business case put together and it goes to, hopefully, if we get the overview and scrutiny function on climate, it goes through that process. I think it would be fiscally irresponsible for me just to pop it in without having gone through that. And that's why it's not in there at this stage. I want to make sure it goes through that process first. But we can work together on that, absolutely. Keith, on your point, I suggest you probably get in touch with Paul Fishwick and have a chat with him directly, and he can answer any questions you've got around that. Obviously, Lindsay has just made a brief comment there, Gary, about the local plan. I was actually in that last local plan working group meeting to discuss the climate part of this, and there's a lot of ongoing work there. We do appreciate it has to be balanced against a lot of competing priorities, but I can assure you, fundamentally, I'm pushing very hard and will fight very, very hard for everything that we can get in there. But also, please remember that building regulations are going to be changing in 2025 as well, which help in that regard as well, with certain measures that go onto properties. So two of them together, and we are very much working on that. I have acknowledged in the recommendations of this that there are gaps still. The process for starting the CEAP, the Climate Emergency Action Plan, starts in October, and then June and July, so we managed to delay it by 3 months to make some minor moderations, but there's only so much you can do in that space of time, so just want to be clear about that. I guess just what I wanted to end on is what I'm very, very keen to see is this embedded fully in the council. I still don't think it's been treated fully like a corporate priority yet. And that's fundamentally what I want to work on. I don't think we need a very big climate emergency team. Ultimately, it should be everyone's responsibility. I want to see it in people's job descriptions that they are responsible for bringing our carbon emissions down, both internally and externally in our geographic region here. And it's important that everyone is a climate champion, and our hub, our nucleus of climate experts who are absolutely fantastic. That it's a privilege to work with, and they are there to bring it together to inspire and make sure it's embedded further. So I'm hoping that in future, more and more members will be able to speak to this as more happens, like Lindsay's just done, obviously, regarding the local plan. But thank you very much, everybody. I look forward to working with people more on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready to go for a vote. Can I have people, hands up, those voting for the recommendation? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that debate. And now moving on to single-use plastics and food waste. Okay. Yeah. Can I do against, please? Thank you. Abstain? Thank you. Still carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to single-use plastics and food waste. Can I invite Councillor Pruberry to move the report, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I wish to propose the recommendation in the agenda And in doing so, can I remind people this is an item about the process followed for a decision and not about whether you agree or disagree with the decision itself. Paragraph 5.4.14 of the Constitution says that the primary route for querying the procedure for making a decision is via overview and scrutiny. However, 7 Conservative councillors have submitted a request for a report to Council, which is their right, without actually waiting for overview and scrutiny to voice an opinion. The nub of their argument appears to be that a key decision was made without being properly advertised. The outcome of their request would normally be that the executive reports to the next available council meeting with their view of the matter. But for reasons I'm about to go into, we have this item instead. As it says on page 180 of the agenda, officers made the decision believing it not to be a key decision. That page also covers the fact that it has not been possible to state with any clarity whether or not it was a key decision. And finally, it says that because that isn't clear, the officer who made the decision has withdrawn it. Therefore, there is now no decision, key or otherwise, on which to report to council, and so that's why it isn't happening. Instead, we have this agenda item, and it says again on page 180 that we are, in the interests of openness and transparency, going to deal with the decision at the executive meeting next week. You are not invited to vote tonight on whether this was a key decision or not, or whether you like the decision or not. You are simply asked to note that a group of councillors had queried the process, that the officer concerned has withdrawn the decision, and that there is an item on next week's executive agenda to deal with it. And I hope, as it is reality, that you will all vote to note those facts. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Majid. Does anybody wish to speak against the report? Councillor Maria G, would you like to reserve your right or speak now? Thank you. Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to see that the reasons for our call-in have been accepted by officers and that the council admits that this decision to remove the provision of caddy liners was a key decision and had not been made using due process, but instead had been made in secret and behind closed doors. Officers do not make the decisions alone. The exec member will probably have been involved. The Conservative group believe that the removal of free caddy liners is likely to damage the level of food recycling in the borough. This is when food recycling has a target to increase savings by a further £350,000 this year, as the cost of processing food waste is about a sixth of the cost of blue bag waste. In the Early and Woodley Chronicle today, the Lib Dem leader seems to agree with us, saying the volume of recycling could dip slightly. For that reason, the removal of free food caddy liners is likely to cost a lot more than it will save if the benefits, instead of being 350,000 higher, are actually slightly lower. The Liberals originally claimed that ditching caddy liners was necessary because of environmental concerns. Then they suggested the Conservatives had cut the budget, which was proven incorrect. They now seem to say that in the paper that it hasn't been budgeted for next year. This is blindingly obvious, as the budget for the next financial year has not been agreed yet and won't be until February. If anybody is cutting the budget for these caddy liners, it is the Lib Lab coalition. The paper furthermore tries to blame the failure to follow due process on an officer decision. However, only 2 months ago, the Liberal executive member was shouting about it being his decision in a press release. The Lib Dem leader also confirmed in the Woodley and Early Chronicle article, in direct contradiction to the recommendations in the paper, which clearly state the withdrawal of the original officer decision, that the decision has been made and the executive meeting is simply to ratify it. Because of these reasons, I'm imposing this recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was quite shocked when I read the press article on the 13th of July about the decision which had been made to scrap the free distribution of food caddy liners. As my colleague, Councillor Jorgensen, has already said, that decision was made behind closed doors and avoided any scrutiny of the rationale in doing this. Where is the business case for this action? Where is the analysis of the impact on the food waste recycling rates? Where is the specific food caddy liners budget saving from 1 year to the current year? All these are some key points that deserve the scrutiny of councillors. So it was inevitable that the non-transparent nature of this decision would prompt a call-in, something that Liberal Democrats used to use quite rightly many, many times, so they should be aware of it. The result of that call-in we are now talking about. Our call-in reasons have been totally vindicated, which has meant that the original decision has been withdrawn. This means now that the proper decision-making process potentially will now be carried out at the public meeting of the Executive on September the 29th. Again, as Councillor Jorgensen highlighted, Councillor Jones in the Reading Chronicle yesterday said the decision has been made. The decision has been made. Clearly, Councillor Jones had not read the report saying the decision had been withdrawn. The decision has not been made and won't be made until the executive meeting on the 29th of September. So is he saying we'll ignore the outcome of the call-in? Don't think so. Or is he simply going to pay lip service to the proper decision-making process at the executive meeting, which probably is the case. Finally, I actually feel for the lead officer who appears to be taking the full brunt of this call-in. They quite rightly quote 5.1.9.3, which states the lead officer decides whether a decision is key or not. What is not mentioned is that 5.1.9.3 also says such a decision has to be made in consultation with the relevant executive member. Yet there is no mention of the executive member anywhere in the report, which leads you to question whether this actually occurred.
Thank you. Councillor Norman Jorgensen, please.
Thank you. You won't be surprised to hear I also have concerns about the process adopted in this case, to reach a decision. I also have a concern about the decision itself and the request that food carrier liners continue to be provided. I feel it likely that food recycling will decrease if this decision is carried through. This at a time when we wish to increase recycling and reduce blue bag waste. I would like to just go through some of the financial aspects, since it's mentioned in the paper about apparently no budgetary provision has been made. Reminder of how we reach budget decisions in this council, but all the papers go through scrutiny, and the papers for this went through scrutiny in November last year. And if there is a saving to be made by removing something, it's identified specifically in the budget papers. So the finances were covered specifically for food waste on the 24th of November scrutiny meeting last year. And there were questions asked about savings that could be made. And you'll see in the medium term financial plan that there is a saving identified £350,000 for this year associated with diverting food waste from the blue bags to recycling. 500,000 was saved in financial year 2019-20 due to moving food waste from blue bags to food recycling. That represents 5,000 tonnes of diverted waste. It also said in that scrutiny paper in the minutes of the meeting, an answer to a question, that there was a potential for saving further £1 million if all the food waste in the blue bags could be diverted to food recycling. So there's quite a lot to go at, and 350k was part of that. So I think here you're erecting or proposing to erect, depending on whether you've reached the decision or not, a major obstacle to food recycling if the carrier liner bags are not supplied. So I pose the question in that case, how do you propose to achieve the additional food recycling that's built into our budget? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregor Murray, please.
Whether a decision was made or not, residents were told on the 15th of July that the decision was made to help tackle the climate emergency and reduce the borough's use of single-use plastics, as well as saving money. Each of these three reasons are rubbish. It was my motion on eliminating single-use plastics from council operations that was passed by this council, but to say food waste bags are being withdrawn because they're single-use plastics is ridiculous. The solution is not to remove the food waste caddy liners, it's to find another source for them, something that I had previously requested of the relevant council directors. 100% biodegradable compostable bag options are available, many of which have a degradation life of 12 to 18 months. From memory, our food waste participation is about 55%. This means that about 45% of our food waste is still ending up in the waste stream, costing us significantly more money than cutting liners will save. Rather than the short-termist thinking of cut the bags, save some cash, we should be looking to the long term and finding ways to reduce food waste from going into the waste stream, therefore saving more money in the long run. I also heard a ludicrous claim that the money for food waste bags wasn't budgeted, but page 48 of this very agenda shows that £60,000 is in the climate emergency budget for food waste collection, with a handy added statement for clarity stating that they are therefore all financed by relevant teams and have gone through separate approval processes, so should not be affected by budget constraints. Finally, if this foolish action is about taking the climate emergency forward, the coalition should know that the biggest thing that this council can do to reduce our carbon footprint is to work to create more sustainable behaviours among our residents. By withdrawing food waste liners, we create a barrier to residents participating in the food waste recycling scheme. If this council truly wants to cut its carbon footprint, then rather than withdrawing food waste liners, we should actually do the opposite. A 2020 independent report backed by CIPFA compiled for this council states, and I quote, in 2023-24, the report recommends a rolling provision, reduced numbers at increased frequency of free food waste liners. This would encourage participation in the service through ensuring residents do not perceive this service as messy to participate in. We expect a 1.2% increase in recycling rate by greater participation, creating a greater food waste yield. Rolling provision of food waste liners, it tells us, implementation cost £190,000. Overall cost after reductions from the increased rate of recycling, minus £80,000 a year. Withdrawing food waste liners will only increase non-participation rates. I meant to finish this up by saying why I oppose this. My question is actually, as all residents have been told there's 3 reasons for making this non-decision apparently, will all of our residents be told that actually it was made false in the first place? Will you be putting out the same level of communications saying that you didn't make this decision and it's not going to happen as you did in telling residents that it will?
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yet again, I wasn't intending to speak on this. This to me is very obviously a procedural point. It's developed into a debate about the virtues and vices, as it's seen by the opposition, of a decision on the food liners, food caddy liners. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's a very clear recommendation that relates to a process that we have to go through. And I think there've been some good comments on process, and those are perfectly legitimate, but there are an awful lot of comments on things that are not legitimate to this item.
Thank you. Councillor Maria G, would you like your right to reply?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to draw council's attention to what we're noting. So this is a noting item. It's a noting about process. We're going to note the reasons for the call-in request by the 7 councillors made on the 20th of July. Now, you can vote against that if you like, but you're ignoring what you've said about the call-in. The withdrawal of the original officer decision that ceased the provision of single-use plastics for food waste caddies. Unless you think there's something incorrect or lying in the report, then you've got to vote for that as well, because it does say in the report that there's a withdrawal of the original officer decision. So vote against that if you wish, but it doesn't seem logical to me. And that the key decision report will be considered by executive at its meeting of the 29th of September 2022. Now, I know we can't always see into the future, but honestly, it's only a week away. Couldn't you just wait? Well, you're going to vote against that as well? It's just madness. It's going to be considered next week. Are you going to note that or not? You can decide not to note it, I suppose. but it doesn't make a terrific amount of sense to me. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Prue-Bray, would you like your right to reply?
Thank you,
Sorry,
Madam.
hold on, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like
Point of order, isn't the second replying at the end, and therefore there's no more speeches?
But Councillor Baker has already spoken, so I'd be interested in his point
it's a
of order.
point of order, and any councillor is allowed to make a point of order any time.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker, what is your point of order?
I am so pleased that a lot of emphasis on that side of the chamber has been about process.
Sorry, what is your point of order?
I will get to that. I'm just going to introduce it. I just want to introduce it, please. Please.
Quiet.
Please. I'm just going to acknowledge Councillor Conway's, who I have the utmost respect.
Point of order?
Yes.
Which point of order?
His point about process. Right. Point of order is 5.4.8, the forward programme. I'll read it for you so that you don't need to dig it out of the book.
I'm sorry, that doesn't relate to point of order that's relevant for this meeting, does it? Nothing's been raised about that.
Sorry, can I take advisement, please? Thank you. Thank you. On advisement, your point of order is not relevant to this report.
Excuse me, it is, because the report has broken rule 5.4.8.
Sorry, I have taken advisement, so it's my final ruling. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Prue-Bray, would you like to continue, please?
And I was going to start with Keith's comments because I do accept that he is usually diligent about this sort of thing, but he's led himself up a bit of a blind alley because his points that he's trying to make, including the last one that he's tried to make, and the one earlier that he tried to make, which I think was 5.1.9.1, all rest on the fact that this was a key decision. However, if you read the report that was put into the agenda on page 180.
Sorry, Councillor Prue-Bray, Keith Baker, why?
If
What's
I
your
could make,
point? Sorry,
it's a
can I?
point of personal explanation. Councillor Bray did not actually.
Sorry, can I have the point of order first?
No, because it's a point of personal explanation.
Okay.
Councillor Bray has been accusing me of trying to do a point of order incorrectly. Since she did not hear the point of order because you ruled as mayor that I could not make that point of order, she can't make that sort of comment. I wish she would keep personal comments out of this.
Thank you. I'll take advisement again. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. That's a fair point of personal explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not trying to suggest that you're doing something wrong, Keith. I'm just trying to say that you are like the Conservatives who put forward this thing, and the speeches we've heard from the Conservatives tonight, they are asserting and believing that this is a key decision. And all the things they have said apply if it is a key decision. However, the report that is in the agenda says written by the monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer say that it cannot be determined clearly whether it is a key decision or not. And that is why we have got this item and not a report from the executive. And if the monitoring officer and Section 151 officer had been clear that it was a key decision, we would have had a report from the executive to this meeting explaining it, rather than the item we have got. So therefore, if they have deemed it's unclear, it is unclear, and you can assert it as much as you like as it's a key decision. That is your right, but it doesn't make it a key decision. So that's the first thing I would say. And also, I would say it's very disappointing. Despite the fact we've just had a debate on the Climate Emergency Action Plan, it appears that the Conservatives are absolutely determined the council should give millions of single-use plastic bags to residents every year. There never has actually been a budget for this. It's not just not a budget for this year. If you're so keen on providing these bags, why have you never, ever put anything in the budget to pay for them? So never have. There is a line in the CEAP about food waste collection, which has been correctly cited. No, You can shake your heads as much as you like, you haven't. There is a line which I think it was Gregor correctly cited about the money in the CAP for food waste collection. That is not to provide green waste bags. Okay, that's for other aspects of food waste collection. Okay, well, you can laugh if you like, but that's the case. So to return to the actual subject of the agenda item, Council is simply being asked to note reality, as Maria laid out so well in her seconding speech. All we are asked to do tonight is to note what is happening to try and bring some clarity when there was a decision that was made and withdrawn that some people think was a key decision and some people don't. This will be discussed at the executive next week. Let's agree to note that and get on to the next item of business. And while I'm standing, Madam Mayor, can I propose standing order 4.1.12M, which is to continue the meeting beyond 10:30.
Do you have 6 people? Thank you. And a seconder? And a seconder, please. Thank you. Can we put this to a vote to take the meeting beyond 10:30? Those in favour? Thank you. Against? Abstain? Thank you. Carried. Right, we will take the report to a vote, please. Those in favour of the report, please show your hands now. Noting, sorry. Against? Okay. Abstain? Thank you. Thank you. That report was not carried. Thank you. We're now moving on to member question time. Okay, thank you. I've got Michael Firminger to ask the question of the executive member for climate emergency and resident services, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. When he was executive member for climate emergency, Councillor Murray, following my introduction, was working to provide Freely Fruity with land at Barkham Solar Farm site to use as a permanent base for their fruit tree and vegetable growing charity. What will the new executive member do to ensure that Councillor Murray's commitment to this amazing charity is delivered upon?
Thank you for your question, Michael, and for introducing Freely Fruity to the council. Establishing and maintaining strong partnerships is a priority for this administration. Sometimes as a local authority, we have done things to our community rather than with them, and we must recognise that partnership working allows us to collectively achieve a lot more for the benefit of our community. I have been meeting and talking regularly with Freely Fruity about their work and aspirations, and I've been really impressed with the work that they do. I'm pleased that the council is working with a vibrant, ambitious charity, which shares our objectives and commitments to addressing the climate emergency and our social values. Our discussions with the charity are ongoing, and we are currently reviewing the business case for their request to plant a community orchard, whilst considering the legal requirements regarding the use of the land, as well as being able to meet all the operational requirements that Freely Fruity require. We need to ensure that we are being diligent with the use of council assets and secure best value for our residents. In short, we are supporting their request in principle, subject to agreement on the technical details. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have. Yeah, I mean, they're truly dedicated people. I know that. Yeah, say Freely Fruity, bit of a tongue twister, this one, isn't it? Freely Fruity recently won an award for their mission to plant more fruit trees in our community. As Wycombe looks to plant hundreds of thousands of more trees in the coming years, what proportion of these will be native fruit trees?
I can't answer that at this moment in time, and I'll have to get you a written answer, but it's a good question, so I'll provide it in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Carron to ask the question of the leader, Clive Jones. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the question standing in my name.
Thank you for your question, Gary. The whistleblowing policy and guidance arrangements in the Constitution applies only to council employees, former employees, agency staff and contractors engaged by the council. The policy protects their employment if they raise a concern about perceived danger or illegality by the council that affects others. It does not apply to elected members, and therefore the protected disclosure rules will not apply to them as a member, has no employment to protect. Any person, including a member, should bring notice to the council if they perceive any wrongdoing by the council. The council must be seen to support whistleblowers. This is an important part of the democratic process.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Section 9 of the Code of Conduct, which covers whistleblowers and ethics, appears to be, if you read it, biased to the council and its officers, not elected councillors. I mean, examples are officers can report an elected councillor to the Standards Board monitoring officer, but an elected council doesn't have the same rights. Also, a senior officer can withdraw an elected members' rights to access junior officers. There's a reference in it as well to has the elected councillor apologised to the officer, but there is no reference to it has the officer apologised to the elected councillor. This would imply wrongdoing is one-sided. Officers can use the word confidential on any document, but elected councillors cannot do so at risk of disciplinary action if they breach confidentiality applied to a document. Finally, if a critical comment is made by an elected councillor and the council considers it's not in the public interest,
Sorry, Mr.
it can be
Councillor
deemed.
Carron, we're running out of time again.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I would say very simply, should this matter be referred to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as on the surface it would appear to be not fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your supplementary, Gary. I think you make some good points, and if it's okay with you, I'll get back to you in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lauren Blumenthal to ask a question of the Executive Member for Housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When Councillor John Kaiser held the housing portfolio, he was exploring with officers increasing percentage of social and affordable housing to 50% on all new sites. He was working towards including this as a policy amendment to the emerging local plan. This was to reflect the shortage of affordable homes in the borough. Please can you share if you agree that this is a good idea to help tackle the housing crisis for those on lower income, and will you be supporting this target yourself?
Thank you for your question, Laura. I greatly admired John Kaiser's work when he held the housing portfolio, and I have spoken with him on housing matters since I succeeded him. On the specific point about the 50% target for social and affordable housing on new sites, I too have been exploring this with officers. A 50% target makes sense given that about half of new housing would need to be affordable if it were to meet local demand, as revealed in our own housing needs assessment. And of course, in light of the number of residents waiting for suitable accommodation on the council's housing register. Whether we can achieve 50% or some percentage higher than the current 35% on major strategic development locations will depend on whether the viability of development at such a percentage can be demonstrated to the local plan inspector. It's important to remember he or she is the final decision maker on this. And we have to balance, obviously, our requirement for more, our desire for more affordable housing with other infrastructure requirements that we want developers to provide to mitigate the impact of new dwellings, such as highways improvements and new schools, as well as improving environmental performance. Currently, on most sites, we try to achieve a balance in the affordable housing provision between social rented housing, which is about 70%, and shared ownership, which is about 30%. First homes will soon come into play on some sites as a new affordable housing tenure, providing discounted market housing for first-time buyers. In an area such as ours, however, much of the discounted market housing will not be truly affordable to many of those who need accommodation. I'll just finish this very shortly. Much of my effort, therefore, is going to be devoted to trying to maximise social rented component of affordable housing that we secure through the planning process.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do, and thank you for your response. The previous Conservative administration made a commitment to deliver an additional 1,000 affordable homes in the next 5 years using council resources, and the council is on target to achieve this. Is it your intention to maintain momentum and fulfil this commitment?
It most certainly is my intention to maintain momentum. In fact, if it's possible, I would like to increase the pace.
Thank you. Councillor Graham Howe to ask the question, Executive Member for Children's Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In 2019, the Conservative administration started the Solar on Schools project. The economic rationale is that schools typically spend 84% of their annual budget on labour costs, 5% on standing costs, and as at 2019, 5% on energy, leaving only 6% left for discretionary educational spend. They're facts. By installing solar on schools, the installations to date have shown savings which have reduced energy to 3% of budget and more, therefore increasing the discretionary educational spend from 6 to more than 8%. Thanks to President Putin, the world has changed. We must address ourselves to those things we can do something about. It is obvious that the tripling in energy prices, I'm not sure whether there's a cap for schools at the moment or not, but I've said no cap in the question, puts all schools into deficit, which is still going to be true. Council could do something about this by catalysing the Solar on Schools programme by adding batteries, monitoring systems to make the utility energy savings. On the premise of addressing our energies, the things we can do something about, will the lead member for Children's Services make sure that the current Solar on Schools programme is accelerated to the full on all our 66 schools for the benefit of our 22,000 children with immediate effect, and inform ward members of the scheduling progress within their wards?
Okay. Right for me to answer? Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Howe for his question, and I share his interest and concern for ensuring that schools and other settings are able to make the most of renewable energies, especially at a time of significant fuel price rises nationally. But as the council will know, school governing bodies and trustees make decisions as they relate to the utilisation of the school resources, rather than we as the council directing such measures. And as such, we shall continue to encourage schools to explore the use of solar power as potential solution to the issues that you have rightly highlighted.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, and I know that we would be aligned in our objectives here. You're absolutely right that it is the governors that do make those decisions, and you know, with all of our secondary schools and 3/4 of our primary schools being academies, that's even more applicable. But there are things that we could do with Salex Finance, for example, and for financial packaging to create encouragement for this to happen. And in light of the green agenda that we all want to follow, then I ask you please to do that and make it a key part of the strategy within children's services.
Okay, I will be very happy to work with Sarah Kerr as the lead on climate emergency to do what we can to progress this programme, because it is important. We've just had that debate on the CEAP, and we do need to do everything we can to encourage movement in that direction.
Thank you. Councillor Shahid Yunis to ask the question of Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is that with inflation rocketing, will the administration commit to freezing or below inflation rent rises for the council's social housing tenants?
Thank you for your question, Shahid. As you know, the ring-fenced housing revenue account relies on rent from social housing tenants to provide the money for repair and maintenance of existing rented properties. The HRA also supports business plans to expand our social housing stock, such as the Gorse Ride project. As an executive member, I have to be mindful of the need to ensure the long-term viability of the HRA, which is not immune from the serious challenges we're experiencing across the council: high inflation, rising demand for services, and shortfalls in anticipated income. Even so, this administration is committed to focusing what support it can give on those who are the least well off in our community. I am very aware of the hardship faced by many of our tenants who are not supported by housing benefit or other state payments. That constitutes about a third of the total of our HRA tenants. I'm therefore working with our officers to produce the lowest level of rent rise for existing tenants in a way that will protect the long-term viability of the HRA.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you for your response. I think these are the most vulnerable people in our community. I was expecting a more maybe firm commitment. I understand the financial pressures as well, but hopefully you can give us some firm commitment that definitely we will take some action and the burden is reduced, because they're having to make a choice between putting food on the table or actually paying the rent.
Thank you, Shahid, for your supplementary. I can assure you I am taking this very seriously indeed. It is my ambition to ensure that we have the lowest level rise we can possibly get. I am very well aware of all of those issues that you talked about in terms of the human impact of all this on vulnerable people in our community. And of course, I want to do everything I can to ensure that any rent increase is a minimal one. I can't say much more than that at the moment. I'm going through a process of proper consultation, including with our tenants through TLIP. We have a process we have to go through. There's a government consultation on proposed caps coming up very soon, which we have to permit a formal response to. You will perhaps see a little bit more of the thinking of the administration in that response. And we have to, of course, wait for a final decision towards the end of the year. That's when we'll be able to firm this up. But I am very much in sympathy with what you're saying, and I will be doing my very best to ensure we protect our tenants.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart Munro to ask this question of the leader, Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At a recent meeting, Clive, of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, you stated that the Town Centre Regeneration Programme did not make money and therefore did not benefit the whole borough. Can you please clarify this, as this statement is very clearly incorrect?
Thank you very much for your question, Stuart. My comments made at overview and scrutiny management were made in relation to a question about opportunities to regenerate other areas of the borough. Now, on the back of the Wokingham Town Centre regeneration programme. To clarify, the Wokingham Town Centre regeneration programme was a large investment for the authority, and the income generated by this scheme is currently paying off the costs of the investment, including the debt repayment. The income envisaged at the creation of the scheme is currently not being realised.
I don't think that's the case, Clive. I think you'll find that actually the debt's being paid down faster. My question is, are you sure that that's correct? Because I don't think that is true.
Is that your supplementary question?
I think it is true, Stuart, but I will check and I will get back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Baker to ask this question of the Executive Member for Climate Emergency and Resident Services, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In January, the Council unanimously passed the Anti-Abuse Charter. The motion said progress updates would go to the relevant overview and scrutiny panel twice a year. When will it go to overview and scrutiny?
Thank you, Keith, for your question. It has been recommended to Council's Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee to review the work on the Anti-Abuse Charter as part of the Violence Against Women and Girls update at the November 2022 meeting. And a further update on progress has been recommended as part of the March 2023 committee meeting.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary? Thank you. We have a question from Jackie Rance to the leader, Clive Jones, but unfortunately she's not here tonight. So if Councillor Jones writes a written answer to her.
Very happy to do that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Peter Harper, please, to ask a question of the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since the last consultation with the people of Finch Hampstead, the plans for the changes to California Crossroads have been changed, and hence the results of that consultation are no longer valid. Considering the length of time that has passed since the last consultation, will the Executive Member for Highways commit to carrying out a consultation on the proposed changes to the junction at California Crossroad?
Thank you, Peter, for your question. The scheme is funded by Section 106 developer contributions tied to legal agreements from the Arborfield SPL, and it can be only allocated to that project. The scheme has been delayed for the last 2 years due to a combination of COVID and the ridges being shut. Otherwise, it would have already been constructed. Consultation that happened in late 2018, early 2019 is still valid, as the design have been based on that feedback. The design was considered, the feedback from the consultation, and are shown in the latest plans. We have been working closely with the Parish Council, members and other stakeholders on the design and hope to begin construction next year.
Do you have a supplementary? Thank you very much. Thank you. We're now moving on to the minutes of committee meetings and ward matters. We have 20 minutes for questions. Can I have a show of hands for people who'd like to ask a question? Thank you. Keep them up for a while. Thank you. Okay, I think we've captured everybody. If we miss anybody out and we've still got time left, please put your hand up again. Thank you. Councillor Swaddle, please ask your question.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My question is for the executive member for highways. Residents of Woodley are concerned by the danger of cyclists in the pedestrianised town centre, and it does feel that it's only a matter of time till somebody is seriously injured. I'd like to ask what the executive member for highways can do to deter cycling through the shopping area to improve safety for my residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for your question. I've actually seen cyclists going through Woodley Town Centre. It's something that I would certainly look into for you, and I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shirley Boyd, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak about Almost Leisure Centre, which is in my ward. I've had reports about increases in the cost of swimming, which are huge. And I would like to ask the executive member in Chenton if he could speak to Places Leisure to find out why the cost of a family swim has increased in certain age groups by 42%, which seems to be an extraordinary amount of money. And also in this climate, I think people will just think, well, we can't afford to teach our children to swim. And I find that very worrying, particularly in light of what the fire officer said earlier on about the dangers of water. So could we just look into why we've got these draconian increases for swimming at Almost Leisure Centre? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I'm already looking into that following some exchanges on of emails in the last week or so. And I'm just waiting for answers at the moment. I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
And to Councillor Baker, who was also involved.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Dennis, please.
Hi, this is a question for the Executive Member for Active Travel. Bearing in mind the petition we had earlier about Floreat School and the dangers there, I will note there are issues with the crossing, traffic and pupil safety. So I would like to ask the Executive Member to be a site visit with me and a relative, the appropriate officer during a school drop-off to actually observe and see the issues that we are aware of.
Thank you for your question. I'd be happy to meet you on site with an officer at school drop-off time. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please.
Thank you. My question is to Executive Member for Highways as well. Parents are calling for pedestrian crossing to be installed on Fairwater Drive near Highgate Road. This is a dangerous place for children to cross to get to school. Will you support the parents' call for a crossing? There's already been a site visit with an officer.
Thank you, Laura, for your question. I'll look to see if it's actually listed at the moment on the integrated transport schedule and then see where that is and if any surveys have been done. And I'll come back to you on that.
Thank you. Question from Rachel Shepherd-Dupre. Councillor Rachel Shepherd-Dupre. Thank you.
My question is for Paul again. The residents of Lenham Close have been looking for some double yellow lines on their road between Old Forest Road and the flats. I just wanted to know why that's not in the present roll-up traffic regulation offer that was just put out, please.
Thank you, Rochelle, for your question about Lenham Close. Amendment 5, which is currently being consulted on, was set up under the previous administration. So I'm not sure why it's not been included, but I'll find out where it is on the list and whether or not it's going to be in Amendment 6.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel Burgess next, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is also for the Executive Member for Active Travel and Highways. On the new Keep Hatch Gardens development in Norries, there's a fenced-off balancing pond on the corner of Oak Avenue and Binfield Road. which includes much needed footpaths around that pond, which allow pedestrians to walk away from the busy road where there isn't a pavement. This pond has been fenced off for months and months, with weeds are now growing through the new paths around the pond. Lots of fresh planting has died, but more importantly, because the footpaths remain fenced off, there's no safe pedestrian route for those walking along Binfield Road. They end up walking in the road because there's no pavement or footpath. I received frequent pleas from residents to resolve this. So can the executive member follow this up with the relevant officer and the developer to get these paths finally open and protect the safety of pedestrians walking through this area of noise?
Thank you, Rachel, for your question. I certainly will follow that up. It sounds like it hasn't been adopted yet, so I'll come back to you on that. Thank you.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question's for the Executive Member for Environment and Leisure. I'd like an update, please, on the progress on the Laurel Park car park gates. The securing of the gate has been managed by residents for more than 10 years. It's a long-standing issue. We've had a series of email conversations on it, and I did email you on the 12th of September following your promise to give me an update on it. And I'm just wondering if you could tell me how this is progressing, because I don't seem to have had an answer.
I did update you in early August on that very subject. We have been in the holiday silly season, so it has been difficult to get a further update, but I have requested a further update on where we currently stand, and as soon as I get it, I will pass it on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Mickleborough, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is also to the Executive Member for Environment, Sports and Leisure. In January of 2021, the very large membership of the Early Environmental Group presented a wonderful proposal to WBC that could extend the existing protection of the much valued green corridor along Lower Early Way by its designation as a local nature reserve. Strengthened environmental designation would massively benefit the flora and fauna, our own borough and other residents, and protect against attempts to build on this vital green space. Could you please provide an update on WBC's response to this important proposal?
Well, we very much appreciate the proposal from the Early Environmental Group. I assure you we're keen to improve the protection of biodiversity within Early and the other points that you mentioned. We will undertake a detailed assessment of the proposal and consider how best to take it forward in the coming months. I must acknowledge that progress on this request has been slow, and I would like to thank the EEG for their patience. But the council has recently brought in additional ecology officer, which should enable us to progress this type of request in a much more timely manner going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Shahid Younis, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member of Children's Services. I have a number of cases in my ward where children haven't been able to find places in the preferred schools. Some of them literally live 100 yards from the school, but instead they've got places which are right other side of the borough. As a result, children are traveling to schools that are located far away, and some of the parents have actually decided to homeschool them, and they would rather not send them to the schools. This is obviously detrimental for the environment and obviously and also for the children concerned as well. This situation seems to be worse this year. I haven't seen that situation so bad over a number of years, been around for a few years now. What steps are being taken to find school places near to where the children are living? This is obviously not a short term, it's a permanent solution we need to find. Thank you.
You're right, it's not a short-term solution. One of the reasons why this is getting worse is that there are more and more children coming into the borough from outside, particularly from Hong Kong, where Wokingham seems to be a very attractive place for Hong Kong people to come to live, which is fine, but it is putting unprecedented pressure on our school places. We also have something like 150 Ukrainian children that we've also had to put in our schools, which is slightly more than we were anticipating. And the rate of applications is not letting up. We have a situation where the schools are not necessarily where the pupils are. We also have a situation where we have a lower birth rate, so the bottom end of schools were coming into reception means we don't have the pressure on school places, and that makes it difficult to open some of the new schools without unbalancing and destabilising the schools that already exist, because they will be taking the reception in first year one pupils and so on away from other schools rather than filling up naturally from population. So it's a very complicated dance that officers are trying to do. We have got some money in place for expanding secondary schools. That's not going to solve it completely, because parental preference also comes into play and where people live. So it's a really complicated thing. And it would be really helpful if you could actually give me the names of the schools so I can give you an answer that applies to those particular residents in your ward and not just a general principle. And it is going to be hard to solve because we are actually running out of school places, even with the fair access protocol by which we lever additional children into schools. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I might have been forgotten, but I'm glad I wasn't. I've asked so many ward questions on the new Twyford Library over the years that it's going to come as no surprise, I suspect, that I'm asking another one this evening. I was going to say tonight might be more appropriate, on the same subject. This time, however, I'm rather more confident of a positive response than I've been in the past. Will the executive member for climate change and resident services accept my thanks and that of a great many people in the community that I represent for her help in securing the long-awaited new library for Twyford?
Thank you, Stephen. I actually really think that the thanks goes elsewhere, though. Obviously, the ward councillors that have obviously campaigned for this for, I think, 20 odd years. Obviously, thanks needs to go to the officers as well that have got to this stage. But most importantly, thanks needs to go to the Polehampton charity trustees, and particularly the late Dave Turner, and of course the community that have petitioned and backed this from the start. That's where the real thanks should go. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. After that mutual backslapping, this, which wasn't a question, but anyway, congratulations. In the interest of time, this is a question for the leader of the council. Now, during the month of August, I contacted a variety of officers and asked a number of questions prompted by residents of my ward. I'm sure we all have. They included planning, listing of a planning application, leisure, holiday camps in Bulmersh Leisure Centre, parking, to do with Verge parking, parking again, status of 2 submissions for yellow lines, street lights, street light enveloped by vegetation. I've reported it twice. Trees, request for examination of a tree with a view of maybe coppicing. We are now approaching the end of September, and I have not had a reply on any of them, not even an acknowledgement of receipt of my emails. This experience is not new and has been repeated many times in the past, and I believe my experience has been repeated by many others in this chamber. This lack of response is not limited to one department, as my examples above clearly illustrate. It is beginning to evolve into an institutionalised contempt for elected councillors. Does Councillor Jones, Councillor Jones, would you like to listen? Thank you. So does Councillor Jones agree with me that elected councillors deserve better than this? And what steps will he take to make sure all officers respond to all councillors in a timely fashion?
Thank you very much for your question, Keith. You say that you have asked these questions since August, but the lack of response has actually been going on for quite some time. Has it been going on for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4, 5, 6, 7? Any indication? Years. Okay. If you would like to copy me with all of those, I will chase them up with officers, because I think you are absolutely 100% right that we should get timely answers to questions from all councillors.
sorry, Madam Mayor, that's actually my portfolio and I can actually expand on the response if I'd be allowed to. Is that okay? Because the customer excellence programme and performance management sits with me. Is that okay? It should have been directed at me.
Yes, that's okay. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I just wanted to. I've obviously got the customer excellence programme, and we're very conscious, obviously, councillors as customers as well, to the members of the public and the public getting timely responses. We are incorporating, developing the customer excellence programme at the moment that puts the customer front and centre. We recognise that there is a problem and that across loads of departments, we're not getting these timely responses. This also includes updating new CRM system as well to make sure that we don't lose things in the process. There's a huge amount of work being done on that, and I'm more than happy to have a chat with you offline about it, Keith, but I totally agree with you, but we are addressing it.
Thank you. Councillor Maria.
So can I make a point of order 4.2.13.16?
Cheers.
A response by officers. So I thought I would be very pleased to hear what our chief exec has to say on Keith's question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I will respond on that. So thank you very much for asking me that. So I think I would like the examples that Keith is talking about. Obviously, I do. It's good to see the evidence of that, and I do fully appreciate that councillors may not always get the responses that they want in the time that they want them. At the same time, I also know that plenty of officers do respond in the time that's actually required. So there are often reasons for not being able to reply in the time that maybe a councillor wants the answer in, because as you know, our services are complex and complicated. So, but it would be good to get your examples. But as I say, I know plenty of officers do respond and actually are very committed to the services that we provide. And as Councillor Kerr has actually said, we also are putting in place an improvement programme to improve what we do even further, and that's about the tone with which we respond as well. But I think it would be I think it's not quite right to actually infer that there has been there has been a situation where officers don't respond to councillors, because absolutely we do actually completely respect the position that councillors hold and the position that you are in terms of residents. It's just that, as I say, that there will be times when officers can't respond, and there are times when they should have responded and haven't.
Can I just very quickly, Madam Mayor, with your indulgence, how about a simple acknowledgement of receipt? That doesn't happen at all. If I submit something on the web base, I get an acknowledgement. If I submit something to an officer, I don't get an acknowledgement.
Yeah, I'll let me take that away, Keith. You should receive an acknowledgement. It would be good to see the examples that you've got where you've not received an acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very sorry. I think we'll run out of time for members' questions, because we're now going to move on to statements by the leader, executive members and deputy executive members. This is 20 minutes. I will stop it at 11 o'clock. This will be the last item that we'll be doing this evening, and motions will go forward to the next council meeting in October. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This council finds itself in the most difficult period of the last 40 years. There is raging inflation, energy costs are rising, as are fuel costs. Food prices and the cost of other goods in our shops have also been rising for months. We have a cost of living crisis. The value of the pound has plummeted, making our imports very expensive, therefore increasing costs everywhere. Only today, interest rates have risen to their highest level in 14 years at 2.25%, adding further pressure to the budgets of residents and the council. These are unprecedented times where we, as an administration of the council, have to make many difficult decisions. We won't shy away from those decisions. Our first priority has to be to balance the budget. Councillor John Horsall, the former Conservative leader, only a few months ago said that reserves are for a rainy day and it's now raining. Inflation was then around 5%. Well, things have moved on. Inflation has nearly doubled and is forecast by many to reach 18% next year. Things were so bad, the previous administration used £2 million of reserves to plug the gap in the budget. This is the equivalent of nearly 2% increase in council tax. It is no longer raining. We are in a storm and there is thunder and lightning everywhere. There is massive uncertainty in the economy and the council is not immune to these difficulties. But we will rise to the challenge of balancing our budget and maintaining vital services and helping the vulnerable in the borough as best we can. Along with Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubey, the Executive Member for Finance, I and the rest of the Executive and senior officers are working very hard to maintain services. A number of services were not properly budgeted for by the previous administration. These included 18 bus services. We were advised of this budget shortfall 10 minutes after taking over the running of the council. The Winners Triangle extension wasn't properly budgeted for, and there was no provision for food caddy liners. In addition to this, there are serious shortfalls in revenue targets set by the previous administration. There will be a shortfall in the revenue budget from leisure services and a massive shortfall in revenue from car park charges. This could be up to £800,000. This year's budget for the provision of blue waste bags was the same as last year's. Why did anyone think that there wouldn't be a rise in the cost of blue bags? There are also pressures from rising demand for council services across the board, including many statutory services that we must support. We have decided to support free school meals during school holidays to families who normally receive them. This helps over 2,100 families within the borough. Over the coming months, the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be looking at the budget for the next 3 years. Councillors of all parties will be able to look at what is being considered for the next few years before the budget is finalised in January. I encourage all councillors to take part in this process. There is now a new Secretary of State for Levelling Up, and I will be writing to him to ask for a meeting to discuss housing numbers within the borough. This will be the third Secretary of State that we have had in the last 4 months. Hopefully, we will be able to do something to reduce housing numbers forced on us by the Conservative government. I am also writing to other Secretaries of State, including the Chancellor, the Secretary of State for Transport and the Secretary of State for Health. Madam Mayor, as I've said, we are living in very challenging times, but this Liberal Democrat administration will rise to the challenge, protect services as best we can and balance our budgets, demonstrating financial competence. Thank you for trying to interrupt as you promised you would do several weeks ago. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Stephen Conway next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, can I just say you will be the last speaker? Okay, because that
Okay.
takes us to 11.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. The new administration is very much aware that the council needs to work in a partnership of equals with a wide variety of external bodies if our residents and businesses are to be properly supported and the borough is to continue to be a great place to live and work. I want to take this opportunity to report to council on the work we've been undertaking to develop, strengthen and in some cases repair relationships with external partners. Rachel Bishop-Firth and I have been working with senior council officers to develop our involvement with the Hardship Alliance of local voluntary and charitable bodies to help mobilise and coordinate efforts to address the local impact of the cost of living crisis. As the council, like our residents, is feeling the pinch financially with double-digit inflation, rising demand for services, and significant shortfalls in anticipated income, we are not in a position to give the Alliance substantial amounts of money. But we are doing our bit to mobilise resources in a joint effort to help those in our community who are most vulnerable to the pressures created by the current crisis. To this end, a fund for donations from businesses, charities and individuals will soon be established, and I urge all councillors to make their own contributions to that fund. Our work in the Hardship Alliance is an example of the benefits that can come from effective partnerships. We've also been devoting time and effort to rebuilding relations with the town and parish councils. We started recently with a very productive meeting with town and parish clerks. We hope that the borough parish liaison group will also be able to play a significant part in developing our partnership in ways that bring real improvements for our community. There is still much to do, not least in gearing the borough council itself up to more effective and productive partnership working. We have some excellent examples of good practice, and we want these successes to set the benchmark for more effective partnership working across the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to declare the meeting finished and over. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in October. Thank you.
Wearing a bit of a funny t-shirt today, but it's because of some of you